that kind of. Give them a minute to get us up and going online. Good morning. My name is Lynn Kenyon, and on behalf of the rest of the coordinating board staff, especially loan program operations, grants, and special programs, I'd like to welcome you to the coordinating board. Welcome our online viewers as well. The majority of our participants are going to be online, but we are happy to see those that are here at the coordinating board offices today. I have several housekeeping items that I'd like to go over before we get started. First of all, if you are here at the coordinating board, you were given a guest name tag. Very important that you wear that when you go out to the restroom or when you leave for lunch and come back. It's a security thing, so make sure that you have your name tag on. Bathrooms are located, if you go out the way you came in to the main hallway, turn right, you will see the restrooms on your left in the middle of the hallway. Women's is on the left, men's is on the right. Please feel free to get up and go as you need to go. There's also refreshments. I was about to say restrooms again. There are actually refreshments at the back of the room, not restrooms. And Jane brought cookies, as she usually does. So thank you, Jane, for doing that. So there are cookies and some coffee and then some water. There is also a break room where you can purchase Cokes, but you can't do it with cash. You'd have to have like a debit card. If you use a debit card, you have to purchase a minimum of $5. It's my understanding. If you use it as a credit card, you can just pay for something less than $5. But there are Cokes, and there are actually lunch items in there. If you wanted, when we break for lunch, if you want to go there for lunch, you can do that as well. When we do break for lunch, you should have, I don't know if you have it available to you, but a listing of restaurants and fast food places around this area. The most popular one for time, etc., is Luby's, which is almost right next door. So, but you could also go to the break room because, like I said, they do have lunch items in there. Microphones. Because we have so many online viewers, I know we can hear each other if we talk without a microphone, but unfortunately our online viewers cannot hear us if you ask a question or if we have some interaction. So we have placed microphones throughout the room. There's 2 large handheld ones and then 2 lapel mics. On the large held ones, there are 2 on switches, one at the bottom and then one at the top. So you have to turn both of those on, and I believe it'll flash green when it's going. Same with the lapels. There's only one on switch for the lapels, but you will see the difference that it'll turn from a red blinking light to a green blinking light. PowerPoints and handouts for our online viewers. If you are able to see the PowerPoint slide right now, you can see that your agenda, PowerPoints, and handouts are available on our Grants and Special Programs website. They're also available on the main website, but you can go here as well. And if you go to the workshop section, you'll see the different handouts that are available. If there's an additional handout to the PowerPoint, it will also be there. Many of the presentations don't have an additional handout other than the PowerPoint, so those are available to you. We also made copies of the handouts for those of you that are here today, and they were available when you checked in if you didn't have time to make copies on your own before you got here. Email address for online viewers. Again, we encourage questions. That's one of the things that I think makes a workshop do well and it makes it a quality workshop is if we have some interaction between the presenter and the audience. So it's easy to do that here when we're face to face. Online viewers have it a little bit more difficult, but there is an email address that we have set up just for our workshops and our meetings. So if you send us your question, I'll be manning that email address, and we'll be happy to share that question with the presenters so that you can take advantage of an answer to that question. It is FA Meeting, no S, just FA Meeting at thecb.state.tx.us. So if you send me your question, I'll be happy to share that with the presenter and with the audience so that we can get that question answered. Evaluations. People in the audience here should have an evaluation in your packet. If you don't, we can get you one. Online viewers, if you go to that first address to our GNSP website, under this particular workshop, you will see the evaluation. And if at the end of the workshop, if you could print that out, complete it, then print it out and attach it to an email to FA meeting at THECB. We would really appreciate that. For those of you here in the audience, if you'll just complete it and leave it on your tables when you leave today. We really do look at those, and we try to, in fact, we made changes from the workshop that we had last week to this week because of some of those feedback forms that we received. Streaming, anytime you try to do where you're a workshop where you're trying to accommodate different types of audiences, there are always challenges. One of our challenges seems to be the webcast part of our workshops, and I know we've received feedback that sometimes the streaming of the online webcast is delayed. Sometimes you'll see our mouths moving, and then you'll hear what we've actually said, a few seconds later. And I know that's really frustrating. I have been told that that's usually an issue on the receiving end and not on our end. And I don't know. I know it's frustrating. If it's really bad, you can send me an email, and I'll be happy to get with our IT folk in the back and just see if there's anything that can be done. Probably not, but hopefully we'll keep our fingers and our toes crossed, and hopefully it'll be good today. And last but not least, we have had a few agenda changes from our initial agenda that we sent out when we first announced our workshops. One of those changes is that Jane will be doing the presentation for exemptions and waivers. Connie was not able to be with us today. And then the other change was that we originally had our loan program operations folk coming in to talk to us at the end of the day about college access loan and Beyond Time. They reviewed the number of two-year institutions that are actually participating in those programs, and it was so few that what they decided to do was, instead of do a whole hour presentation on Beyond Time and college access loan, they will come in at 2:00 at the very end of our workshop today and see if any of our participants online and here at the coordinating board, if you have any questions that you would like to ask about the loan program, so that they can definitely make sure and address those before you leave. Anything that you need to know about before we get started that I didn't go over? Y'all know of anything that I missed going over? Okay, well, we're going to go ahead then and get started, and we're going to start off with Jane talking about program allocations and negotiated rulemaking.
Good morning. We are very pleased to have you here, both in body and in cyberspace. So thank you for joining us. The negotiated rulemaking process has been quite interesting for all of us who for the first time have been involved in it. Senate Bill 215 that was passed a year ago was the coordinating board's sunset bill. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the sunset process, but basically all state agencies will go out of existence unless on a regular basis, I think it's every 12 years, the Sunset Commission does their study and agrees that it should continue to operate. This is kind of our soup to nuts review by the state, and they come up with lots of suggestions and so forth. This particular time, one of the things they decided to address is the allocation process. Now, by allocation, what we're talking about is taking the pot of money that the legislature appropriates for a program and divvying it up among the participating institutions so you can make awards to your local students. As you can imagine, that There are some formulas involved in that process, and what the coordinating board's goal, as we have done these in the past, was to try to get the money distributed where the eligible students were. But those have all been based on decisions made up here and formulas worked out up here without much institutional feedback or input. And so one of the recommendations from the Sunset Commission was that the allocation process in particular for financial aid, although for all of the trustee programs that the coordinating board works with, which turns out to be about 50 different programs, but all of them have to go through this negotiated rulemaking process to try to get institutions and other stakeholders involved in the devise or design of these allocation formula. Okay, again, one of the main goals of the allocation or the negotiated rulemaking process is that negotiating part. It's getting the stakeholders together to talk about what should be done and come up with a consensus model of how the allocation should be done. To get the committee pulled together is a fairly significant process. Our agency sent letters to all of the presidents and chancellors of relevant institutions. TEOG is only two-year colleges, so it would have only gone to the two-year institutions, but also to the Texas Association of Community Colleges and so forth. So this was sent to all of the people that we were able to recognize as being stakeholders in the process, and they were invited to nominate people to be on the Sunset Committee. Those nominations come in, and then a group at the coordinating board looks at the array of people that have been nominated and tries to come up with a good cross-section of the institutions, geographically, size, location, that kind of thing. And then that gets posted in the Texas Register for comment. People have an opportunity to say, ooh, that's a good-looking committee, or come up and say, you don't have enough people in this area on that committee. Once that's been done, the issues that are brought up are addressed and the committee is finalized. Next step is to come up with a facilitator who is not a subject matter expert. They don't know necessarily anything about financial aid, but they are there to make sure that the process works correctly. And so they conduct the meetings. And one of the first things they do is get the committee members to agree as to how they want to define consensus. You could have consensus 100%. You could have it at least 60%. The committee gets to set it. I've attended a number of these committee meetings, and so far, all of them, the decision was to go with unanimous consensus. And then that group, having decided what it takes to get consensus, then sits back and starts to figure out what that formula for distributing the money should be. Okay? Not a simple process, but it's intended to be as deliberate as possible to get the people talking who need to have an input to the decisions. Okay. So we now have consensus, we have defined consensus, and the next step is to get the group talking about how it could be done, how it might be done, how it has been done, to come up with its own formula of how it will be done. Once that formula or those formulas have been devised, then those go into a rule to be a part of program rules. So for instance, they'd be a part of the TEOG rules or the work study rules. And those also get posted in the register for people to give us feedback on. All comments have to be addressed. And at times you will amend the rule. If you amend the rule because of the comments, that amended rule has to go back to the committee. The committee has to agree to that revised version of it. Once it has a revised version, if it's been a significant change, it might have to be posted again. I mean, this, again, is a very deliberate process to get the input. Eventually, hopefully, you get consensus, and it gets posted and people are happy with it, and then it goes to our board for approval and becomes a part of our regular rules. Nothing to it, okay? All right. One of the programs that we looked at this fall is the Texas College Work Study Program. Now, this one is a challenging program because it is open to public and private, 2-year and 4-year, and health-related institutions here in Texas. So potentially about 150 different institutions can take part in that program. The committee was brought together. At its first meeting, it didn't reach consensus. It didn't get a workout, but they got a plan in place and then asked for some statistics. Then they met a second time, and based on that, they came up with a final formula. That formula now has been adopted by the board. It was posted in the register and adopted by our board. And what they decided to do was to look at each institution's number of students who were Texas residents, enrolled at least half-time, both of which are work-study requirements, and full-time students. So they, again, at least half-time. The part-time students are counted as half, full-time students as a whole, and then for each institution you get a total, and then that total is used as the basis for figuring out their share of the money. What they are also looking at is if we identify these kids, shouldn't there be a need criterion? Obviously, work study has a need factor. So the need aspect that they put into the formula is an EFC cap, expected family contribution cap. And that cap is the average community college cost of attendance living off campus, 30 hours. So it's in the 14 to 15,000 range. So most students, a lot of our students are included in that group of students considered as a part of the allocation base. So once that is done, that was used this year for the allocation of work study for 2015 because the rules were adopted in time for us to do it for the coming year. So that's how it works. It is not a simple process, but it is very deliberate, and it's intended to get institution input. Okay? Any questions on it so far? All right. Go a little further. The rules that get adopted don't just have the formula that they want used. It indicates where the data will come from. And most of the time, the data is coming from the financial aid database. So it's data that you've submitted that's been certified and so forth. One of the challenges that we've had in our allocations for so long is that we wanted to use the most current data possible to make those calculations. So for instance, when we did the 2014 calculations in spring of 2013, we were trying to use 2013 data. And so you can imagine every time you look, the data slightly changed. So that's part of the complexity of what the old system was. One of the things that's been happening in all of the financial aid negotiated rulemaking meetings is that an agreement to use prior year data, not current year data. That has two positive things. One is the data isn't changing, it's already certified. And the other one is that it may enable us to complete the allocations a little bit earlier in the spring, and everybody wants to know their allocation as soon as possible. Okay? The other thing, that is put in all of our rules is we've had this February 20 reallocation deadline that's been in our rules, or not in our rules, but it's been in our procedures and our guidelines for a long time. Now it's in rule, so that's nice and set. And another thing that's quite unique, we didn't have this before, is that when we send out your allocations, you are told the basis of those allocations, and you have 10 days to get back to us and say, ooh, that isn't what we reported for the number of students, at least half-time, who are Texas residents and so forth. So we get the luxury of having you check our data to make sure we're quoting your information correctly, and you have the satisfaction, hopefully, of knowing that we had used your data properly. So that's, again, part of the consensus model kind of thing. We did that this year. We had some questions about the data, but I think once everyone understood we were getting it, we did not have any problems with it. Okay. These are the programs in the grants and special programs area that are involved or could be involved in negotiated rulemaking. We've talked about work study. Texas Grant also went through this process, and but the timing of that was such that the formula could not be finalized in time to use it for 2015. So the Texas Grant allocation formula will go into effect next year, not this year. TEOG is being our problem child. We've had 3 meetings so far, and we've had 1 telephone conference with that committee, and we still haven't completed it. We have another meeting coming up in July. The people are doing exactly what they should be doing. They're negotiating. They're trying to look at different options. So as a result, 2015 for TEOG was done on the old methodology, and we hopefully will have the new formula in time to do it for 2016. What happens if they don't reach consensus? If the committee if it becomes a hung jury, what happens is that it then falls back on the coordinating board to come up with the formula. That would still be posted in the register, still have comments and so forth, but we're hoping that will not be the result. We hope this group can reach an agreement. Top 10, because we don't allocate funds, isn't subject to this. So that's one that we just kind of get to float by. Yay. Okay, any questions about the process? Have any of you had people from your institutions on these committees? Okay, did you get any feedback? Did it seem like they felt it was a fair process?
Our president's on the committee, and then she also
If you'll use.
Would you use thank you.
Sorry. There's 2.
Yeah.
This is a test. This is only a test.
Our president's actually on the committee, and she then also asked for guidance from us on certain topics.
Great. Did she seem comfortable with the way it had run?
Absolutely. She sat on them before. So.
Great. Okay, well, as you can tell, with about 50 different programs of trusteed funds, we're going to be really good at this by the time it's all over with. It is likely that these committees, well, in fact, we have been told that this is a one-time committee activity. Once the rule is adopted by the committee is dissolved, and probably a couple of years from now, maybe 3 to 5 years from now, we would pull another committee together, have another look at it, saying, is this still the way we ought to be doing it, and so forth. So this is, the allocation process from now on is going to be in the hands of these committees, and we're very thankful to have their input and suggestions. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Joella Martinez. I'm going to be presenting to you today on the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant Program, which we like to refer to as TEOG because it's just a lot easier to say that way. Welcome all you online viewers. I'd like to just tell all my online viewers that if you are unable to see any of the slides, there is a packet of the PowerPoint in your handouts. Please pull those out and follow along if you have any difficulty reading the slides as they come through. For all you folks here and online, welcome. I am really excited today to be here to talk to you about the TEOG program. If I seem nervous, I am. This is my very, I have big shoes to fill. You know, the queen of presenters just shifted over and gave it to me, and, you know, I have to fill her shoes, so I'm going to try to do you justice. Okay. We at the coordinating board have acknowledged that there have been a lot of changes in financial aid. You got a lot of new folks coming in, learning the programs, and it could be very overwhelming. So in today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about some basic program information for TEOG. We'll talk about the initial and the renewal eligibility requirements in this program, the satisfactory academic progress, which is your SAP, some new changes that went into effect in 14-15 year, the funds request process, student award history. We'll give you a few little scenarios before we close it out, and then I'm going to provide you with some very important deadline dates and important contact information. First, let's talk about TEOG. What exactly is a TEOG? The TEOG program is a program that provides grant funding to eligible needy students to be able to attend two-year public institutions. TEOG is funded through appropriations that's set by the legislature's office, and which in turn the coordinating board will then allocate those funds to all participating institutions on an annual basis. Okay. What does it take to get an initial award for TEOG? Well, the student needs to be a Texas resident as determined by your institution. They have to be enrolled at least half-time as an entering undergraduate student, having not accumulated more than 30 semester credit hours. That's excluding the credits for dual enrollment or by any examination. The student must be registered for selective service, or they can be exempt from the requirement. Your student cannot have been convicted of a felony or a crime involving any type of controlled substance. They have to demonstrate financial need. And I just have to tell you folks, I'm a little excited about this EFC cap. In 1314, it's always been that the student has to have a 9-month EFC cap of no more than $2,000. Since I started administering this program 4 years ago, that EFC cap has always been $2,000. So it really, really is exciting to see that it's gone up beginning in the 14-15 school year. The EFC cap, in order for a student to enter as an initial award, for an initial award, is $4,800. And again, your students cannot have concurrently been receiving a Renewal Texas grant. That's a no-no. So any questions in my audience or online about eligibility requirements for initial awards? You online viewers, if you have questions and we have moved on to another slide, please forward those questions on. We can address them at a later time, even though we have moved on to another section of the program. Okay, let's talk about renewal eligibility. Your students will need to be enrolled at least half-time as an undergraduate student who previously received an initial TEOG award. The students must maintain the classification of being a Texas resident. They will have to be registered for selective service or exempt from the requirement. Again, they cannot have been convicted of a felony or a crime involving a controlled substance. And they do have to show financial need. However, renewal students do not have an EFC cap, so, that's a good thing. They do have to meet satisfactory academic progress, which is the SAP requirements. And for renewal students renewal students who come at the end of their first initial award only need to meet your institution's SAP. Once the student has received the renewal and is coming up for their second renewal, then they have to meet the program SAP, which is they have to have a 2.5 GPA and they have to have completed 75% of the completion rate. Any questions? Cyberspace? Anybody in cyberspace? No questions? Okay. Okay, good. Okay. The maximum time frame for a student to receive a TEOG award is that they have to have received it for no more than 4 years or 75 semester credit hours. Attempted while receiving the grant, or an associate's degree. So whichever one of those three comes first. What's new? What's coming new? Well, the allocations for your FY15 are going to be increased, and this is to compensate for the absence of you being able to make Texas Grant Initial Awards. So that's a woohoo. For the funding in 2014 for TEOG was $13.9 million. It is now going to go up for the funding in FY15 to $60 million. So that's a lot of money, folks. Get out there, find the students. TEOG, please remember that your renewal students do take priority when you're awarding your students. The transferring authority between TEOG and Texas Grant is no longer going to be an option. Before, you used to be able to move your money, shift it back and forth from Texas Grant to TEOG or TEOG from Texas Grant. That is no longer going to be available for you to do because of the fact that Texas Grant you're not getting a Texas Grant allocation. Your Texas Grant renewal funds will be made available on an as-needed basis, and I believe we'll touch on that a little bit later. Okay, the award amounts. This is just a little chart that you can keep at your desk, post it up, on your Facebook, something, anything, anywhere. Just to remind you about the award amounts for awarding your students. If your student is a full-time student, the maximum award amount that student can receive if they're enrolled in 12 hours or more is $1,350 per semester. As a three-quarter time student, they can receive $1,013. Those are your students that are enrolled in 9 to 11 hours. Your half-time students who are enrolled in 6 hours, between 6 and 8 hours, can receive $675. Anyone who is enrolled in less than 6 hours will no longer be able to receive an award unless, let's go to the next slide, unless for the 6 hour, less than 6 hours, if your student is enrolled in less than 6 hours and granted a hardship, then you would be able to use the hardship provisions for those students if you gave them a hardship. If the student was enrolled in less than 6 hours because they had 75 semester credit hours left, then you would use the proration schedule. So the award amounts would need to be prorated as follows. For students who have 12 hours or more, they can receive 100% of the maximum award allowed for the program. 9 to 11 hours, they can get 75% of the maximum award, and 6 to 8 hours, 50% of the maximum award. I know we went a little backwards on this slide. I apologize. I got confused just a little bit. So required proration, what is the proration for students who are enrolled in less than 6 hours and you gave them a hardship approval? It would be the maximum amount of the award for the semester divided by 12 and then multiplied by the number of hours that the student was enrolled in. The proration schedule for students who are enrolled in at least half-time, because they're coming near that 75-hour limit and they say they only have 4 hours left in the program, then you would prorate that award by 25% of the maximum award for that semester for that student. Okay, we're going to talk about you online viewers. This funds request form may be hard for you to view, so if you just look at your handout labeled C, there is a copy of this handout, and we can just kind of follow along as I say 1, 2, 3. This year we made a few changes on the request form in order for you to request funds from the coordinating board. You will now have to go on our GSP website and log into your institution's account with your FICE code and in order to pull up this form. Now, on step 1, it's pretty self-explanatory, but we still get a lot of confusion about the funds request form, so I'm going to try to explain it to you in detail as much as I can. If you have any questions, please stop me, raise your hand. Online viewers, send in an email to Lynn, and she can let me know that there's a question. On part 1 is pretty basic information. We need your financial aid director's information, your reporting officer, and your business office. Why do we need so much? Well, we put together here at the coordinating board a little contact listing for each institution, and it's very important that we have direct lines in case we have a question regarding this funds request that comes in. We don't want to delay the funds, to your institution, so we can just pick up that phone and call somebody. Also, when you submit this form, anyone that you put as listed as the reporting officer, that email that you give us in that portion the system is gonna bounce out a courtesy message letting them know that we did receive it. Your funds request was received at the coordinating board and it's in process. So that way that's a confirmation to you, doesn't get lost. Then you're like, where's my money? I didn't get it. Didn't get the funds request. The business office contact, we use that information to issue out. We'd like to keep everybody informed when EFTs are coming so everybody knows that the money's on its way and everybody can kind of stay on the same page and say, okay, here comes the money and we're going to go ahead and process it. Okay, step 2 of this funds request form, this is where you request the funding. Column 1, where it says current amount being requested, that's the total dollar amount that we need for your initial and renewal monies. The number of distinctive student awards being funded. Now this is very important because we get a lot of confusion when they come in. Let's just give you a little example on step 2. If in the fall you submit a funds request form for $10,000 for IY students at say 20 students, and then $10,000 for renewal students, number of students 20, and then in the spring you want to award those same students, we don't need you to give us another count of 20 students. But if you have added 5 students to your initial count, we only need you to say 2,500 for IY students, 5 additional students. We don't need to count the 20 that were previously reported. That goes for both initial and renewal. Once and it's automatic, it totals up on its own, so you don't have to enter the total amount on that. On section 3 of this form, thank you. On section 3 of this form, TEOG, where it says the allocation amount, that's the amount that's allocated to your institution. You will enter it, your allocation amount will stay the same. Anytime you submit a funds request form, that allocation doesn't ever change because that's what's allocated to your school. The year-to-date amount will change because if you requested, say, $20,000 in the fall and then you're requesting another $40,000 in the spring, then you will add the 20 and the 40 there. The total number of students will be the number of students you reported in the fall, including the number of students that you added in the spring. Okay? Step 4 of the funds request form is by signing, that's just stating that you certify that the information that you're reporting is accurate and that's exactly what you're wanting to request, and then you just date it. Now there is a step 5 to this. Say you submitted a funds request form and you said, oh, I didn't mean to send that. I need to change the number of students. That's not how many need to be reported. You would indicate that you need to revise the funds request, submit a new one with the new information and click revised, and then on the little statement you just need to let us know at this day I reported this amount of money, this many students, I need to make changes, this is replacing that one, and we'll go ahead and replace that funds request and keep it. All this it has come out because of an audit, and we need to make sure that we keep everything in sync so that we're covering all bases, okay? Any questions on the funds request form? Any questions on how to get online to get your funds request form? Okay, so y'all do know you need the password, so your password can be retrieved from the Director of Financial Aid, who should have, or the representative at your institution who holds those passwords for your institution. Okay. Refunds. We call them refunds, you call them returns. So when I say refunds, I really mean returns. We like to keep, like I said earlier, we at the coordinating board like to keep everybody on the same page. So we like to include emails to people that should get the information. If you send me a funds request form with 3 individuals listed on there, more than likely I'm going to bounce out a courtesy email to all 3 so everyone knows what is coming, where it's supposed to go, what's supposed to come back. So those email notifications will be sent out to your institution telling you, okay, first of all, we'd like the institution to email us and let us know that a refund's coming. Because a lot of times our business office will get money and they'll say, well, what is this for? And we're like, I don't know. So if you can send us an email just to let us know, hey, I found out, X amount of students weren't eligible. I need to return some funds. What is the process? Then I can send you a copy of the wire transfer listing and information on how to return those funds. And we can adjust your students' information, your institution's information, your accounting. That way, towards the end of the year, we're not like, oh, what happened here? The numbers don't match. We can try to catch it as we go. If we need to have, or we have like a question, let's say it's, you already sent me money, you're going to send me money again. I'll take it, but just in case, you never know. Okay, retroactive or late disbursements. This is just information for you to know. I'm sure you're very well aware of it. But like I said, we know that there's some new financial aid advisors out there who may not be aware that if funds are dispersed after the end of the student's period of enrollment, they must either be used to pay a student's outstanding balance for his or her period of enrollment at the institution. That's to make payment against an outstanding loan that was received during that time, and also this is very important, under no circumstances must you issue any late disbursements to students. It has to go towards their account, anything that's outstanding, any outstanding balance on their account. Any questions? Am I going too fast? Online viewers, please send in your questions. I want to answer them. Okay. This is something that's coming your way. It's been implemented. We do have some information on it already. They'll discuss it a little bit more in detail in another presentation, right? No, not today, sorry. But we will get you some instructions on how to process this. But there is going to be a student award history file. The objective for this is to be able to provide institutions with a secure method of letting you know about student awards. Students who have transferred from other institutions, this will give you an idea instead of you having... We understand y'all are bombarded at the school. I applaud you because y'all do such a great service to the students. And so we try to find different ways to make it so much easier on your end to be able to identify your students. So this is one of the purposes of having this student award history, so that we can provide you with this service. This will give you the information on the student's eligibility for any state aid. Of course, I believe it's going to be program specific. So the information, the guidelines, and the instructions will tell you how to submit for each program to retrieve your student listing information. And the report will only produce information on those students who have received state aid for that, for that listing that you submitted. Okay, time for a little scenario. You didn't ask me questions, but we're going to go through some scenarios, okay? So in this first scenario, you have a student who is eligible for a TEOG award in the 14-15 school year, and she enrolls in halftime. She enrolls in 6 hours for the fall and remains a halftime student through the census date. Can she receive 100% of the maximum award? No? No? Online viewers, you agree? Yes. Okay, good. Correct.
Joella, sorry, go ahead and finish that one, then I do have a question for you.
And you're correct. No, as a halftime student, she can only receive 50% of the maximum award amount. That's one of the changes that was made. And we have a question?
The question is, if they do have a late disbursement, the student does not owe money to the institution, nor do they owe a loan for the period of enrollment, do they just refund the money back to the coordinating board? If it's a late disbursement TEOG.
Were they eligible for TEOG?
They were eligible for TEOG, but they're trying to disperse it after the end of the enrollment period, and they're wanting to know, since there's nothing owed to the institution and no loan owed by the student, do they they really can't award it, they need to send it back, correct?
That's correct. They have to send the funds back because everything has been paid. Everything has been paid. Thank you for that question. Love it. Technical difficulties. Okay, I'm just going to ask you the question. How about that? We can follow along on the little packet. Okay, the next scenario is you have a student who has been receiving a TEOG award and continues to meet the eligibility requirements. He is enrolled in 12 hours, but only has 4 hours of eligibility remaining in the program. Is he eligible for 100% of the award? And I lost my notes. Did we come back up? Yes, no, no. Okay, yes, no. Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Some of you say yes, some of you say no, and she's calling you out. She's agreeing. Okay. And the answer is going to be no, because the student, now let me see if I can read my notes. I have to have my notes with me. He's not eligible for 100% of the award since he has less than 6 hours remaining of the 75 semester credit hours. His award, however, must be prorated and cannot exceed 25% of the maximum award amount allowed for the semester. So, yeah, because there was that change, that he can only receive that. Yes, yay, y'all were right. Okay, let's go on to the next scenario question. Online viewers, do you have any comments or questions regarding? Yes? No? Okay. Okay, the next scenario is a student is enrolled in the 14-15 school year for 12 semester credit hours and receives 100% of the maximum award allowed. Prior to the census date, the student drops down to 6 hours. Is the student still eligible for the TEOG award? Yes?
Repeat their answer.
Okay. I'm sorry, you said yes.
Yes, but only 50%.
It was said yes, but only at 50%. So they're enrolled if the student yes, you're correct. You're correct. I had to make sure that was what it said. Yes, you're right. It's exactly yes. The students will have to be, the award will have to be decreased to 50% of the maximum award allowed. Okay, and this is the last scenario, I promise. You submitted a funds request for 20 IY students for the fall term. And in the spring, you submitted another funds request for the same 20 IY students. On step 2 of your funds request form, do you include the student count for the previously reported students? No, that is correct. It would be 0 if you're only, if it's the same 20 students, just give me a 0 and just give me the dollar amount and a 0, unless you're going to add a student or 2.
Joella, we're being told that the online viewers can still see the PowerPoint.
Yeah, correct.
Can still
Oh,
see the
great.
PowerPoint apparently, so they're not having the same difficulty we are here. So that's a kind of a flip.
Well, I'm so glad that you can see the PowerPoints. I wish that I could flip them for you so you won't stay stuck to one. Are they seeing one page? Or? They can. So if I click,
So, Sophia, since Sophia can see the slides, if Sophia will progress them, since that would be difficult for
Okay.
you to do, that would be cool.
if
And
we can get to the program deadline date, Sophia, for the TEOG presentation, if you can just kind of click through there.
And I have another online question for
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Go right on ahead.
Question is, a student is found to be eligible for TEOG after the enrollment period. So it would be, they're thinking late disbursement. All charges are paid by Pell. However, we would award TEOG and adjust the account to use TEOG to pay the tuition and fees. So the refund would not be TEOG, it would actually be Pell. Is that allowable? And the answer would be yes.
That will be yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
That is a good question. Sorry.
excuse me, sorry. Now, in your packet, you have handout B, which gives you the grants and special programs institutional calendar. It has a listing of all the deadline dates. Did you have a question? Or? You have a question?
I do have a question,
Okay, go ahead.
but I was going to let you through.
Oh, that's okay.
So now that we don't have Texas Grant Initial, so of course we're still having probably students that probably are eligible for Texas Grant. We award them TEOG at the community college. They stay here 2 years and they transfer on. Do they then become eligible? Should we? My thought is we have all these students coming that in our world would have been Texas Grant eligible, which when we used to run out of Texas Grant funds, we'd kind of roll them into the TEOG. Life would go on.
There is going to be a new, which will be discussed in the Texas Grant presentation,
Yes.
a new TEOG avenue, transfer avenue for students coming from two-year institutions with a prior TEG fall 14 or after to get into the Texas Grant program. And Sheba will go over the details, but they will also have to meet some hour and GPA requirements in order to get into an initial year Texas Grant. But yes.
So when we're trying to award these, it would probably be good to look at those first-time incoming students that are our full-time students, kind of getting them in that pathway.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I mean, that's what I was thinking. Your incoming students would be kind of your first choices. Okay.
Okay, so regarding the program deadlines, I put 3 deadline dates up on the screen. These are the important ones that are coming up soon. First of all, July 15th is the last day to submit and certify your TEOG end of year report. If you haven't already done so, please send those reports in. I promise you I will help you try to clear up all your errors if you have any kind of issues. I just, want to make sure that I get everybody, and I don't want to get everybody at the last minute because I don't like letting everybody wait on me. I would rather wait on you. But in this case, if you start sending them in now, we can clear all those errors and get them through. September 1st, 2014 is the first day that institutions can start requesting their FY15 funds. Those haven't gone out yet, correct? The preliminary numbers have gone out for allocations.
Yes.
Official allocation.
The allocation, the preliminary allocations for 2015 have gone out. They went out in April. They are still preliminary. We are waiting for the Legislative Budget Board to approve the transfer of funds from Texas Grant to TEOG. And as soon as we have that final approval, we'll send out an email to everyone to let you know what your allocations are. I would make one note that we know of at least one minor adjustment downward in that we discovered after all of these calculations had been done that $5 million that was in the Appropriations Act to be brought forward from the prior biennium into Texas Grant, it didn't happen because all the money was used. So everybody, public universities, community colleges, everybody are going to have a very slight decrease from what you had in that memo because we had to spread that $5 million decrease across everybody. But if you want to know that, as far as we know, that will be the only revision, but we are waiting for the final numbers or final approval from LBB. In the meantime, if you want to know what that revised figure would be, we'll be glad to give it to you. Just get in touch with us. It's as close as we can get now to a final number, and we will let you know as soon as we have the final approval from LBB.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, and February 20th, 2015, institutions will lose claims to any unencumbered, unrequested funds. So that will be the last day that you can request funds, the last day to request any reallocation if reallocations are available. And last but not least is the distribution list information, contact information, emails, our GSP information website. Please, anytime, if you are not registered for the distribution list, I urge you to register. This listing has a lot of memos that go out, a lot of important information, a lot of Q&As that go out. It is a very informative website for you to utilize. So if you're not registered, please just log in and follow the instructions on that link that's provided in your package. I would prefer emails to the TEOG email box if it's in regards to TEOG specific, because I mandate that email box more than I do my personal email. But please, you can use my personal email as well. I got both of them out there for you to use, so that you can have out there. But like I said, TEOG, the email, we try to get the program, emails first and get them out and answered as quickly as possible. Our GSP information website will hold all the Q&As. It has all the TEOG specific information for all our grants. So please use that website and take some time, review it. You online viewers, review those websites. Any questions? Any comments? Nope. Did I confuse anybody? You can email us if I confused you. Please remember about the evaluation form. It's in your packet. As we go through these presentations, this is the only way that we know how to fix anything that's broken on our presentations. So if you can complete those evaluations with your comments or concerns, if there was something that I didn't cover today that you would like to hear in the near future, please let us know. And I promise all you online viewers, we're not going to tell who sent it in. This is just an information evaluation. So don't be shy. Send them in. Thank you so much for all your time. Y'all have a great day.
Okay, and I think because we're a little bit ahead of schedule, why don't we take a
We're going to get started with Texas Grant.
You might remind the online viewers about it.
Okay, before we get started, just want to remind our online viewers about the email address, fameeting@thecb.state.tex.us. Before I get started with Texas Grant, there was a question that came up towards the end of the TEOG presentation about the transfer options that are going to take place beginning fall 2014 for your students who receive a TEOG. What was put into place is that beginning fall 2014, any student who receives an initial TEOG award after fall 2014 and they transfer to a four-year institution has an avenue to receive a IY Texas Grant Award. That avenue is that the student must come into that four-year institution with a 2.5 GPA and complete at least 24 semester credit hours in order to be considered for an IOI Texas Grant Award. But there has been an avenue created for students who receive their first TEOG award beginning fall 2014. Okay? This afternoon or this morning, we're going to go over some little changes that have taken place with the Texas Grant Program as it relates to our state colleges, our community colleges, and our technical schools. We're going to just go over some of those changes. We'll talk about the renewal requirements, and we'll also talk about some of the funding. I'll briefly just go over some of the things. Joella did an excellent job talking about requesting funds, talking about returning funds to the coordinating board, so I'm not going to bark up that tree again, but if there are any specific questions as it relates to Texas Grant, we'll cover some of those, and then we'll end the presentation with a few scenarios. So are we ready to get started? Okay, some of the new things that's taking place for you guys is that you are no longer going to be able to make IOI awards in Texas Grant. You will only be able to make renewal awards in the Texas Grant Program. What that means as it relates to allocations is that you all will no longer receive a Texas Grant allocation at all. You will be able to request ROI funds for your students on an as-needed basis. We have determined some numbers that Jane mentioned earlier, and so did Joella, about transferring Texas Grant funds into TEOG, which caused your TEOG allocations to increase significantly this year. We do have an idea of what your ROI awards will be for the upcoming year. We're just not providing that in an allocation format for you this year. Are there any questions about that? Any concerns? Online? Okay. Let's talk about the renewal year requirements for a Texas Grant Award. Most of you probably are very familiar with these requirements. To receive a renewal award in the Texas Grant Program, there is no EFC requirement to receive a renewal award in Texas Grant, but there is still a need requirement. Before we get started, though, let's talk about the SAP issue as it relates to renewal, because this is very important, and I see it come up a lot at the end of the year when we're submitting our files. So let's think about this past school year. You have your initial group of students, and you have your renewal group of students that you've made Texas Grant Awards to this year. You're considering these students moving forward fall 2014 for a Texas Grant Award. For your initial students who received a Texas Grant Award this year, they simply have to meet your institutional SAP. Whatever that institutional financial aid SAP is, that's what your initial Texas Grant Award recipients must meet. At the end of the year, you just simply say yes to that, and we know that they met your institutional SAP requirement. For your students who may be in their third year or fourth year in the program, there are renewal students this year. And so those students simply have to meet the 2.5 GPA and the 24 completed hours at the end of the spring term. Okay? And those are for they've been in the program at least 2 years, and they're moving forward in the renewal award aspect. And so they just simply have to meet the 2.5 and the 24 completed hours. The 75% has gone away. That did come up in a question earlier when we started opening up the files for year end. And so you no longer have to meet the 75% completion rate for a renewal award. In addition to the SAP requirement for renewal students, they still must be enrolled at least 3/4 time. Again, they still must demonstrate financial need. They also still must maintain their Texas residency and still must maintain the student eligibility statement, not be convicted of a felony or a drug offense as it relates to a controlled substance. Okay? So the renewal requirements really haven't changed. You're just going to be looking at renewal-only students moving forward. Okay, let's talk about our award amounts coming that are going to be set for our fiscal year 2015. We're still asking institutions to use the targeted award amount initially in order to stretch the funds as far as we can. If you have identified all eligible students at the target award amount and you still have allocations available, you can request more money to increase the awards if funding is still available for you guys. The funds request form, Joella went specifically in detail, very detailed over, she went over this in very detailed, and so I'm not going to go too much into it, but just pointing out some of the things that she mentioned. Contact information is very important for us in case we have any questions. The student account issue is important because we are tracking those student counts throughout the year for the Texas Grant Program. So if there are new students that you've added into the program, but you are only requesting money, you're only needing money for to increase awards, you will only report the new students that you have added to the program. So if you're just requesting funds for students that you've already made awards to, it's not necessary to add those in your student count in the current section of the funds request form. The cumulative section is where we're going to add the total award, is where we add the cumulative totals, our allocation totals, and that kind of thing. And then, of course, the revised versus the original. We're asking you to, if you realize there have been a mistake on the original request, we're asking institutions to submit revised requests with a brief description of why we're submitting a second request. Are there any questions in regards to the Texas Grant Funds request process? It's pretty much the same as TEOG. The only difference is that you're going to see Texas Grant at the top of the file, at the top of the request form. Let's touch on the year-end report, because there was a big change as it relates to our four-year institutions that happened this year that you guys are having to report even though you don't participate in the priority model. So I just wanted to touch base on the data element number 34. We are asking the two-year institutions to provide this information for us even though you're not participating in the priority model. So just be aware that for your renewal students, you're going to indicate a 0, and you're going to indicate 2 for your initial students because you didn't make any awards in the priority under the priority model. Okay. Some additional topics that we can go over today that I didn't put in a PowerPoint. I kind of just listed those here. If there are any questions regarding any of these things, like hardships or proration, that you want to go over this morning, I'll be more than happy to go into detail with you guys regarding maximum hours in the program, refunds. I know that we touched on those earlier. Does anybody have any questions about any of these topics? Online folks, please send us your questions. We love answering questions here at the coordinating board. So if there are any questions that we can cover today to kind of help your process at the campus level move a little smoother, I'll be more than happy to do that. I do want to touch on the student award history just briefly. Joella talked about it under the TEOG program. It's something that you guys have currently had access to through the Grants and Special Programs information website, the ability to check the award history of students. Currently, as it's set up, you can only check 5, I believe, or maybe 10 student IDs. This award history file is going to allow you to check your entire transfer population. So we know that at this point, most of your transfer students are having to self-identify if they've received a Texas Grant Award or TEOG award. This process will allow you to send us a secure file that we will be able to send you back that SAP information in order to help you guys determine whether these students have received a Texas grant or TEOG in the past, and what were those what was reported for those IDs in the past. So this is something new. I think you guys are going to be very excited when it's finally open and available to you, because it'll be a very quick way to verify your transfer students and to see if they are eligible to receive a Texas Grant Award.
When will that process be open?
We're hoping to have this process open by August 1st. And so information and instructions will go out to the institutions through the distribution list regarding that information once it's been open. Yes?
It's not on here.
Need a microphone.
Just get you.
Just talk on summer updates a little bit.
Okay. We have a question about summer updates. I'm going to let her ask it over the mic so our online folks can hear as well. Oh, sorry for the delay.
Testing. If you would just touch on summer updates, when in the summer do we do them all throughout the year? Do we do it after our summer session starts? Like, if you could just explain a little bit more about when is the proper time to do a summer update and how it should be done.
That's a great question, Kim. We have this conversation a lot because what we've noticed is that a lot of institutions are submitting their summer update right before they submit their year-end file. And let me start over. We open up the summer updates usually around August 1st. And the reason why we do that is because we want to make sure all institutions have certified their year-end files to be able to allow you guys to update any student's record who may have attended summer school, to get that SAP information updated and to receive an award the following year. Ideally, I'd like to see the summer updates done probably during the fall semester. I think between September and December is a good time to do those summer updates, because you're literally updating the previous year's record, and it prevents that prior year SAP message that you get during the year-end process. And so a lot of times we're trying to do that and the year-end at the same time, and it kind of gets a little confusing. The summer update file runs very similar to the year-end process. It's uploaded through the SFTP process. It's only 13 data elements as opposed to 34 data elements, so that's awesome. In my opinion, I think that the earlier the better, and you can start doing that anytime after August 1st. The most important thing about doing the summer updates is that making sure all of the previous year's year-end reports have been certified so we can open that process up to you all. Are there any other questions about summer updates? Anybody want to chime in? Okay. Let's go over some program deadlines. Most of our program deadlines are consistent between programs. July 15th is quickly approaching. As you know, that is our deadline to have our year-end files certified for the 2014 year. Kudos to most of my two-year institutions, because a lot of you guys have already done that, and a lot of you guys did it through a perfect certification. And it's something I've been noticing this year. What I call a perfect certification is the total number of students you requested throughout the year and the total number of funds you requested out the year match your certification without problems. I want to give you guys big kudos for that, because that's a big thing, to perfectly certify based off of what you did throughout the year. So thank you guys for those who have already submitted and certified. Some of you guys are very close to certification, but keep in mind that deadline is just in a couple of weeks. Okay.
Sheba, I did have a question earlier. How do they know when a file has been received and it's good to go? Can you kind of give them that process of on end-of-year submissions on what kind of communication they will receive from us?
Okay,
that's that process.
That's pretty easy. That's something I can do. As you know, you guys pull in the file together, and we ask you to submit it through SFTP in a text tab delimited format. When that file has been received by the system generates a file receipt confirmation email. In order for you to receive that file confirmation, you do need to be a part of the generic email that has been created for your institution. Sometimes we get a lot of questions about that. I'm not receiving those emails. How do I add people onto those emails? And a few years ago, the coordinating board requested all schools to create a generic email address specifically for reporting purposes. And so that email address is created at the institution, and you just simply work with your IT department to add or remove individuals who may leave so that the right people are getting the emails from the system when they submit their files. So what happens is you get the file confirmation receipt that the file has been received. If you don't get that within, I would say, an hour, that either means your file wasn't formatted correctly or there's something going on. You can drop me an email through the Texas Grant inbox, or you can give us a call to see if we're having any technical issues. But usually you should get that email notification pretty quick. And then what happens is that the system will generate or process your file. In that process, it's doing all the edit checks against the 34 elements to make sure that the information that you're submitting can be accepted by the system. If there are any errors that are generated after the file has been processed, a second email is going out to that generic email address again, notifying the schools that an error report has been generated for that file. And you should be able to simply go in and look at those errors. And if you have any questions in regards to errors that you are not sure how to clear, that's what I'm here for. That's what we're here for. Feel free to send us an email or give us a call so we can help you clear those errors. Some of the big errors that have come up this year, I would say the prior year SAP is a big one, and the student ID. And in the case of the student ID, if you have students who are transitioning from a student ID to a social, that's one of the big things with the DACA students. You will have to work with me directly or Joella for TEOG in regards to updating those student IDs. And we can work together to send information through the secure email address to be able to get those IDs updated for you and clear that error. The other one is the prior year SAP, and that has a lot to do with students who didn't meet SAP the previous year. A lot of times that is just 1 year out, so the errors that you're receiving this year is regarding the 2013 reporting, and so those students either needed to go to summer school. Well, they needed to go to summer school in order to make up that SAP to receive an award this year. You could possibly, if the student didn't, you could possibly still consider that student for hardship. And so that's one way. If the student went through the hardship policy with the institution and they were granted a hardship Texas grant, then there wouldn't be a summer update that you would do. It would just be a professional judgment in data element number 25 that you would indicate to clear that prior year SAP message. I'm trying to think of some other big ones that have come up this year, but you'll receive error reports. Throughout the day, Joella and I are looking through those error reports, and if there's anything that we notice that we can kind of help you with, as you know, most of you know, we'll give you a call and say, hey, we want to help you clear these errors. So feel free. Communication is very important, and it's something that we have an open door policy, so if there's anything that we can do to help get your file moving forward, we'll be more than happy to do that. Are there any questions regarding your end of year that you wanted to go over? I see you, Kim. Okay.
My question is in regards just to the warnings. The warnings come from another report, and they will be something we'll have to look at when we do the FADES report. So is there something, or do you guys have a suggestion on what to do with those warnings, how to handle them?
Don't worry about those warnings now as it relates to processing your year-end file. Now, that warning that she's talking about is that CBM 001 warning. What it's saying there is that what you reported on that report doesn't match the ID that you reported on your Texas Grant or TEOG file that's being processed now. And so in order to, we will override it for the purposes of getting you certified for our programs, but keep in mind those IDs will need to be corrected or reconciled before you will be able to certify your FADS report in October, December, in the fall. Okay. One thing that we found was that for some institutions, they're using a different FICE for their FADS or their CBM report. And so that may be an issue, that if you're using a different FICE on your CBM report than you're using on your Texas Grant year-end report, then that may be causing those warnings. Anybody want, Joella?
In regards to that, the FICE code, we find that when they're reporting FADS, they're reporting the FADS under a different FICE code, not the Texas Grant in a year or TEOG in a year. So when you report those numbers on your FADS, just take a look at the FICE codes, make sure that it's the same one that you're using to report all your other reports with. We don't know the reasoning for it,
The system is, they're checking against the CBM and ours for our reporting, but FRADS, you're going to submit the same data, and so it has to get reconciled before you can certify that report. Any other questions? Any online questions, Lynn, regarding year end?
I have a question. When we send the email that says this is our certification, we sign it and it goes off to. How do we know you actually get that? Do we just email you and say, hey, we're good?
Usually when the initial certification email is received, if I see it before I hear from the institution, I'll send a courtesy email saying, we've got a certification for you. I just need to have this reviewed and completed and returned back to the coordinating board. You can actually do that through emails. And if once I receive the completed certification form from the institution, I'll reply back and say thank you. But that's normally the process of the certification. And the certification does go to that generic email address as well. Okay. Good questions. Good questions. Any questions?
Scenarios?
Yeah, we're getting ready to go into the scenario. I'm not done yet. We're going to do a couple of scenarios as it relates to Texas Grant. We've gone over some for TEOG. So let's look at the first one. I work at a community college and I have several students who meet the requirements for an IY and an RY Texas Grant Award. Can I award all eligible students Texas Grant in fiscal year 2015? I see heads. No. Beginning this fall, you will no longer be able to make IY awards in Texas Grant. You will continue to be able to make RY awards in the Texas Grant program. Okay, scenario number 2, and it relates to requesting funds, and this is going to specifically relate to the student count on your request for funds. You're in the process of requesting Texas Grant funds for the spring 15 term. In the fall, you requested funds for 50 IY students and 100 RY students, giving you a cumulative total of 150. In the spring, you need to request funds for students who receive funds in the fall, but you have 25 new IY students and you have 25 new RY students. Should you only include the 25 new IY and RY student totals in your student count in your current request section of your form? Someone wants to get the mic.
Well, first and foremost, we can't request IY.
You can't request IY. Good job.
So the question would be, would we actually only put 25 new RY? Yes. and we would not be reporting 150 cumulative. We would only be reporting 100 RY.
Right, exactly. Good question. This scenario spilled over from my four-year institution, so good catch, good catch. He's right. So you guys would only request 100 RY students, request money for 100 RY students, and then you would only include in that spring 2015 request the 25 new RY students that you're requesting money for. Okay? In your cumulative count, though, what would be in your cumulative count for that spring 2015 term? I think you said it. 125 will be in your cumulative count. So please make the adjustments if you have the answers in your handouts. Okay, the third scenario. I'm at a technical school and I requested RY Texas grant funds for a student that I later determined was ineligible for an RY Texas grant award. Can I use these funds to make an IY or RY TEOG award? Can I make an RY TEOG award? Okay, the heads shaking in the room say no. That's right. If we send you money for Texas Grant RY students, you can only make an additional, if you remove it from an ineligible student, you could only give those funds to another eligible RY Texas Grant student. Joella mentioned earlier in her presentation as well that there will no longer be the option to transfer between TEOG and Texas Grant. Okay, our last scenario. In data element number 14, we are to report whether or not the student met SAP at the end of the spring 2014 term. The current instructions indicate in this section a three-part edit check against SAP. But I thought the SAP edit check would only check against the reported GPA and completed hours. Did something change? No, nothing changed. There was a little typo in the instructions for the Texas Grant Program. We didn't remove the 75% in the instructions, but the edit check in the system on the IT end for the programming was removed. The 75% was removed, so it is only checking against the GPA and the completed hours for Texas Grant on that end of year report. This concludes the Texas Grant portion of the workshop. I would like to mention that there is a handout that includes the current guidelines for 2015. Most of the information that we went over today, including some of the things that we did not go over today, is included in the guidelines, like proration, hardship. There's an example of the statement of eligibility. And so please read through that information. If at any point you have any questions about the guidelines, please contact me. Sorry. But before I leave the podium, just want to give you all one last chance to ask any questions or... Yes, ma'am?
I just wondered if you could repeat the answer.
Okay, for this fourth scenario...
You need to repeat her question since there wasn't a microphone.
Okay, so we've had a question in regards to the last scenario, which talked about the SAP requirement on the end of year report. You will probably see in data element number 14 a three-part check of the SAP. It's really a two-part check of the SAP. We are only checking SAP against the GPA and the completed hours. And so the answer was no, nothing's changed. We pulled out the 75%. We're only checking the GPA and the completed hours for SAP. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and workshop.
I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to talk about something that is not on our official program, but I thought you all might be quite interested in, and that's money for 16 and 17. As you know, the state programs, when the legislature starts meeting, have a zero allocation or appropriation. The legislature, one legislature cannot obligate the next legislature to certain expenditures. So each time the legislature meets, it starts with a clean slate as to how much money will go into each program. During the appropriation process, they make decisions as to how much money to go into which pot. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of competition statewide for those for the money. The coordinating board is like every other state agency, puts together something called a legislative appropriation request. And our agency is in the process of assembling that as we speak. In fact, I think our board is meeting upstairs talking about it. No final decisions, certainly at this point, even about what our agency is going to request, but I thought you might be interested in the process. Texas Grant, TEOG, Work Study, Top 10, TEG, all of those programs, at this point in time, we have no idea how much money we'll have in 16 and 17. Earlier, when I was talking about the allocation process, I talked about moving to using prior year data so we could do it earlier. That will really only help us every other year, because every year the legislature meets in the spring when we would typically want to tell you what your allocations are. We have no idea what the appropriation is going to be. Now, what we've done in the past, and I would assume we do in the future, is we would look at what the current appropriation bill looks like. What you have, though, is a House Appropriations Committee and a Senate Appropriations Committee, and they have their separate bills, and they move along, and then they finally go to conference committee and eventually get beaten out. So at any time in the spring prior to the passage of the Appropriations Act, we're still doing our best guess of how much money is going to be in there. We are requesting, or at least there is discussion about requesting additional money for Texas Grant, TEOG. Well, actually, TEOG is interesting because for the current biennium, 14 and 15, we were appropriated $13.9 million each year. That's our normal TEOG volume for this biennium. And then because of the change in the Texas Grant program and the movement of the two-year colleges out of it, we have this additional money coming in to TEOG in the second year of this biennium. Now, the only way that we will have $50 or $60 million in this program next year is or next biennium each year, is if there is additional money appropriated to TEOG to do that. In other words, if they adopt the same budget as the last biennium, we'd probably be back at the most, the 13.9 for each year plus one $37 million transfer. We've got to get them to make a second $37 million addition for us to have steady funding for both years in the next biennium. I'm not telling you this to make you worry, but just to let you know that there are a lot of unknowns that we're dealing with here. So, the financial aid is a very high priority for the coordinating board, but we are also working with a lot of other demands for those funds, even within the agency. So before we know what the coordinating board will advocate, there's going to be some negotiating going on. So the main thing to know is that this process will take place throughout the 6-month legislative session. And at any one point in time, we may have some sense of what the two bills are doing, but we won't know what the final results are. Typically, it's the last bill that gets signed is the appropriations bill. So that's usually the end of May. So next spring should be very interesting, exciting, confusing, chaotic, entertaining. And we will keep you as informed as we can as we go forward. But stay tuned for more details. Any questions about the process? Your institutions also would be submitting appropriations requests. Typically, when these kinds of things go to the appropriations committees, there'll be public testimony taken from the institutions to support or not support the recommendations. So this is a very negotiated process. And but the other thing I would remind you again is that everything that we're trying to do, there are 5 other agencies trying to do something that they feel is equally important. And so those poor legislators are going to have to take whatever fund of money they have and decide how to distribute among all of those pots. So FYI. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Sofia Rodriguez. I manage the Top 10% Scholarship. I may or may not have talked to you before. And we're almost due for lunch, so I'll try to make it quick. In this presentation, I am going to discuss the eligibility requirements for the Top 10% Scholarship, end of year report processes, and also the reimbursement request process, which is a little different than it is for fund requests for Texas Grant and TEOG. Let's begin with eligibility requirements. There are eligibility requirements that affect both initial and renewal when it comes to Top 10%. For you all recipients must be Texas residents. They must register for selective service, and they must meet the need component of the program, which is cost of attendance minus EFC minus Pell equals greater than 0. In this example, you could say that if your school's COA was $15,000 and the student's EFC was $14,999, they would have 0 Pell and they would have $1 worth of need. As long as the need is $1, the student is actually eligible for a full award. You don't just give them $1. You can give them 1,000. So this can be affected by the student's award packet. Let's do a scenario. Say you have a student who has requested their maximum need-based loan amount, and if you award the maximum Top 10% scholarship, and that would exceed their calculated need, could you actually award the maximum Top 10% scholarship? Do you want to go ahead and answer that? Mm-hmm.
Yes, because you don't include the loan in the calculation.
Actually, no. Well, what it is the top 10%, if it is packaged with true need-based aid, it'll be limited by the need-based aid. So if it's packaged together with TEOG, then you can exceed the calculated aid. In this scenario, though, we actually would probably recommend lowering the loan amount and then giving them the full. And that's probably what you were thinking. You're like, yeah, I can give them the full award. I'll just drop the loan amount. So. Other requirements that affect both the renewal and the initial recipients is that they all need to be enrolled full-time in the fall semester through the census date. That is a requirement of all recipients. They also all need to submit their FAFSA in time to generate CPS results by the March 15th deadline or their TASPA by the March 15th deadline. This has been a real stickler, and it's been a lot of students that had an issue with it, especially this year. Why? Let's do a scenario that I have had come up many times. My student would have submitted their FAFSA application on time this year, but March 15th was a Saturday. For this reason, can we count the Monday as their deadline requirement? I see a lot of no's. You are correct. No. Unfortunately, no. The applications all need to be submitted in time to generate the results by the deadline, which would mean they'd actually have to submit it earlier than even Friday. You're looking at Wednesday, and I talk to parents all the time. I did it on Saturday. I'm like, it says results by Saturday, not submission. So it's a little different in that manner. And due to limited funding, we're incredibly strict on this. I'm constantly telling students they're not eligible. So if you are getting irate students, just send them my way. I can handle them. I am. Every single day I get a call, and I'm like, sorry. So There are other specific initial eligibility requirements. One of them is that they must enroll full-time in the fall semester at a public institution of higher education in the fall preceding high school graduation. It's not one of them listed as just immediately following high school graduation. They also must be completed the Distinguished Achievement Program and or its equivalent or higher. And also they must rank in the top 10% of the graduating class in the 6th or 7th semester, whichever you use for admissions or their actual last, high school graduation semester. What's new is that the initial foundation, those students who graduate with the foundation, they will have to have the distinguished endorsement. They can't just graduate with the basic foundation. And that is new, and that will affect those students graduating with the foundation. You can't just take This one comes up a lot. It's a scenario that I constantly hear, and it is, we have a student who could have enrolled in the fall, and we would have gladly taken them, but some horrific thing happened to them. They got in a car accident, their mom died sadly, or something really bad happened. Can we give a hardship consideration so we can take them in the following year? Anybody? It's sad, right? It's really sad. They couldn't make it the first fall semester preceding graduation. No. There are absolutely no hardships for initials. So unless they were in renewal consideration, then you could look at that. But in initial, they have to enroll the first fall semester, 12 hours through the census date in order to receive an award. If they don't do that, they basically forfeit their eligibility for the following 4 years. Renewal eligibility. They must successfully complete 30 semester credit hours within an academic year. So they do have summer. And I talk to students all the time. I didn't make my 30-hour requirement. Can I take summer classes? Yes. So the summer update is a crucial part of the top 10% scholarship. It's almost 80% of renewal students need a summer update. Hardly any of them make the 30-hour requirement within the fall, spring semesters. They also have to complete 75% of their completion rate and 3.25 GPA. And that's starting from the first year, 3.25 GPA. I know you're new, I know it's college now, you gotta keep your grades up. Okay, now we're gonna start discussing the end of year report, which we're currently processing. And a lot of you, like Texas Grant, we've gotten a lot of the 2 years getting their end of year reports certified, which we're really happy. Kudos to you. You guys have really started submitting your files. We're waiting on those 4 years to start submitting files, so. The deadline is upcoming. It is July 15th. This is for you to certify your files and have them all submitted on time. The difference between, now go into the scenario. There is a difference between Texas Grant TOG and Top 10. I already know who your top 10% students are. So when you're doing your end of year report, you have to reconcile that information. I'm expecting to see Billy and Joey and Susie all on there. I know how much they got paid. I know everything about that student. If a student is found that you determine, Billy's not eligible, but I missed Susie and I really want to award her. She's a great student, 4.0 GPA. Can you issue her the award? No. Unlike other state aid, the top 10% recipients, you have to have them on the reimbursement request file. You can't later determine them eligible and you already have the money, you have to refund those funds. You can't keep the money and give it to another eligible student. It all has to do with your reimbursement request file. Any questions regarding this? I get this a lot right now. Nope? Okay. Let's talk about the reimbursement request file. Believe it or not, it's upcoming. Top 10%, you can start submitting your reimbursement request file as early as August 1st. So we will have instructions to you shortly. What's important to remember for the reimbursement request file is that all your files need to be submitted and accepted by October 1st. That's important. That means if you have duplicates, they need to be taken care of. If you have students that you submitted saying that their verification is pending, you have to clear, or they have to clear that verification before the October 1st deadline. If they do not clear it, they are not eligible. Even though they meet all the requirements, ooh, he just brought in his, tax return, not eligible. As a result of limited funding, we are not going to be issuing payments to the institutions till after that October 1st deadline. So even though you submit your file as early as August 1st, I'm not going to pay you until October 1st. You have been warned. So later you're like, I haven't got my money. I know you haven't. So don't call me until after October 1st. All right. October 2nd, in the morning. Where's my money? Yeah. I'll be in Hawaii, thank you. There is incredibly limited funding, and you can tell from the award amounts maximums. This year, initial year award is $600. Last year was $1,500. Yeah, I'm ready for those calls. They made a mistake. It's $1,500. No, I'm sorry, sweetie, it's $600. Renewals are going to be $1,000 for this year. We're going to do a scenario that has to do with reimbursement requests. I know you guys are all on end of year minds, but this is upcoming, so let's do the scenario. Say you have a student who enrolled at University A or submitted their FAFSA and identified University A on their first transaction one, and they met that deadline. Then later they go to University B, but University B doesn't receive their FAFSA until March 25th. Is it possible for the student to provide a printed copy of her ISER transaction one reflecting the error-free submission, or is she ineligible to receive an award at University B? Anybody? You're shaking your head.
I'm just making an assumption since the rest were no, this one's going to be no too.
Oh, yeah? Actually, it's a yes. You can use the later transaction for your determination of eligibility. You can use the earlier transaction for the requirement. So the requirement was met with the earlier transaction, but you determine their need, eligibility, and all the rest of the stuff with the later transaction. So you actually can use transaction one. And that's the date that you would use to say this is the date they actually submitted their error-free submission and meet the requirement of the deadline. So, yes. Okay, when you submit your request for reimbursement files, it used to say that you have an error report. Now, just to make it completely clear, it's going to say you have a rejected report. Because if there's any errors at all, we are going to reject that file. And that includes header and trailers. I had a school who had a trailer error. And if you look at the error report, it has nothing on it. It just says trailer, error. It's like, oh, all my records were accepted, and they weren't. All 150 student records were not accepted because of that one trailer error. So now the file and the report and the email will say your file has been rejected. So we reject your entire file for any error. Your accept emails are going to be more clear as well. When you submit your file, and if your file is accepted, we're going to kind of show you what we've accepted. It wasn't clear for people if they had pending verifications or duplicates. They said, well, I submitted a request for $100,000 and you've only sent me $75,000. Why is that? Well, you reported to me that 25 students were pending verification. So I can't send you those. No, they're fine. They're cleared. Until I get that information, then I can't send out that money. So your accept file will show how much you've requested, how much is approved for payment, and if there's any pending student records. So that it's clear when you get your accept file that we're not sending you the full amount that you requested. Any questions about that? That was a recommendation by school, and I think it's a great recommendation. Pretty black and white. What happened? Oh, okay, there we go. All right, one thing that you do have to remember when it comes to requesting reimbursements for students, some facts about the reimbursement request is we don't check SAP eligibility, and that's good because you're submitting for the request in the fall, and most of these kids went to summer school in order to meet the 30-hour requirement. So we know that you need to submit a summer update. We're not going to prevent you from requesting funds while you make sure, that you submit a summer update to us. So we don't check SAP eligibility. We assume that you've already verified the student is eligible, and we'll take your word for it based on the request for reimbursement file. And also, hardships are reported on the end of year process, not at the beginning. Okay. Joella went over in great detail the distribution list and email contact information. We all prefer that you guys contact us through our program email address, mainly because if we're not here, there's somebody who will be checking that email. If you send it to us directly and we happen to leave to pick up a sick child, you might feel neglected, like, hey, no one got back to me. Why not? It's been days. Well, if you send it to Top 10, someone will definitely get back to you. Any questions at all regarding eligibility? No? Okay.
Sophia?
Oh, yes.
You may have already gone over this and I missed it, but this year, because of the limited funding and the reports being submitted beginning August 1st through October 1st, how are we going to handle the very limited funding? Did you go over that?
We're not awarding anybody, we're not issuing funds until October 1st. And there was a big yellow slide. We will not be issuing you any funds until after the October 1st deadline. Just to be sure that we have enough funds to issue for all eligible students, and if there are any issues, we'll address them at that time. Do we have, Kim?
I have a question. Unlike Texas Grant or TEOG, if a student is not eligible in a year, in a next year or so, they can regain eligibility. Is that with
yes,
the top 10?
Actually, top 10, you can regain eligibility, and I tell that to students all the time. If you have a student who misses a year, they can only get 4 awards total, but they can get it like 1 year, miss 1 year, get it the next year. So just as long as you don't exceed 4, and we won't let you exceed 4. We edit for that. If there's a 5th year, we'll be like, you need to return those funds. Any other questions? All right. Well, you've survived, and now it's lunchtime. Oh,
I have a top 10 question for you. Would you guys like to have top 10 allocated to you to make awards locally as opposed to the current operation where you come through us and compete with all the other schools for the funds? We're in the process of proposing new legislation, maybe, and we're just trying to see would people prefer that over the current operation, and so it would work much more like a Texas Grant or TEOG program. What do you think?
Well, I kind of have a question on where do you find most of the awards are going to four-year schools, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Because we're sitting here, we have to just search for, we don't have people come ask us for these top 10%. I mean, we have a handful here and there, but they're never asking us about a top 10 award. We have it out there on our information and everything. So for us to get a big award, if we waited for somebody most of them don't apply by March the 15th. I mean, no matter what we do, they don't apply by March the 15th, so they're automatically not eligible.
Okay.
So I don't know.
So it's I
think it's always nice,
you're
but
not sure it's that big for you.
I don't
it's
know
not
if
that
that's
big
how it is for other community colleges, but.
Well, at our school, and I'm part IT as well, we created a report where they don't have to come in and self-identify because they're turning in their transcripts and it's already marked top 10. So we're pulling that data so they don't have to self-identify with us. So if they're there, we're going to pull them and we're going to send the information for reimbursement.
Right. We do that. We don't make them self-identify. We pull their information. Of course, most of them don't apply by March 15th. So, if you had just a little bit of an allocation, that would be fine. If you said, okay, everybody, you maybe have 5 or we've had 8 at one point. But
okay, well, good point, May. The distribution, I assume, would be based on prior participation in the program, so it would be low. All right, so we'll listen perhaps more to what the university folks say. Okay, wanted to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
All right.
Hey, we finished a little bit early, about 15 minutes early. Would you like a little bit longer for lunch, and we'll continue to start again for the afternoon sessions at 1, or would you like to come back in an hour and a half and start about 1:45, which would be better?
12:30 then.
Oh, does it say 12:30? I'm sorry.
Yeah, 12:30 is on the schedule now.
Well, we only gave an hour for lunch. Well, then good. You need 15 minutes to get out there. So forget I even asked that question, and we will break now for lunch and be back at 12:30 to continue. Thank you. Welcome back for our afternoon sessions. I do have an announcement to make before we begin the actual program. We found out that the reason we're not getting any questions from our online viewers is because for some reason they're getting bounces back from messages that they're sending to the FA meeting at THECB website, email address. So I need to ask online viewers, if you sent a message in this morning, if you will resend it to my email address, which is lyn.kenyon, KINYON, at thecb.state.tx.us. And I will be happy to get that question out there so that we can get an answer to it. One of the questions that was sent this morning that was then forwarded on and finally got to me during the lunch hour, one of the questions was from an institution that was wanting to know about the 30 semester credit hours required for top 10 eligibility, wanting to know if dual credit courses could be included in that 30 semester credit hours. The 30 semester credit hours is intended to show hours completed toward the student's degree during the year. Dual credit courses are not attempted or completed during the year, that freshman year or that sophomore year when you're trying to show 30 semester credit hours completed. So my initial response, and Jane agreed, is that that's really not the intent because it's not attempted and completed during the year. However, on a side note, for renewal, as Sophia mentioned, you do have professional judgment authority. If a student is not completing the SAP requirements of 30 semester credit hours or a 3.25 GPA, you have the ability, and you should have a hardship policy on your campus for top 10, as well as the other state financial aid programs. But you could, in that situation, look at that student's individual circumstance to see if they have a hardship that you would consider and approve for continued eligibility in the program if they do not have the 30 semester credit hours that they're required to have. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Okay, so again, our online viewers, if you're just now getting back and tuning in, the email address, for some reason, FA meeting at THECB is not functioning appropriately, and we have our IT staff looking into it. So if you have a question, or if you sent a question this morning, we did not receive it, and that's why we kept saying, so online viewers, send in questions, because we weren't getting any questions. If you will resend that question or send new questions this afternoon to Lyn, LYN.Kenyon, KINYON, at thecb.state.tx.us, and I will get that question and we will make sure that it's presented and we get you an answer to it. So that being said, I think we're ready to go with Jane Caldwell is going to come up and we're going to talk about exemptions and waivers.
Howdy. Were you able to find something to eat? Good, 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 good. I was asked to let you know that we do have some extra copies of the handouts, and they're on the table out there. If anyone would like to take an extra copy or two when they leave, you're welcome to do so. Exemptions and waivers. How many of you work with exemptions and waivers? Okay, very good. Let's talk about what we're talking about when we talk about exemptions and waivers. If you look at the statutes, it's kind of hard to figure out what they're talking about. Exemptions And so the coordinating board has come up with its own definitions, and we try to use this consistently in the materials that we share with you. So this is what I mean when I talk about an exemption. First, I need to remember to click the button. Okay, exemptions to us are programs that allow either a resident or a non-resident to pay a reduced amount of tuition and or fees. That's a pretty vague comment. Exemptions range from a single fee to all tuition and fees. You know, it's a very large basket of different programs when you talk about exemptions. To us, waiver, though, is a pretty singular thing. It's something that lets a non-resident pay a reduced tuition rate. Okay? So we have the border county waivers, we have the competitive scholarship waiver, we have research and teaching assistant waivers. Those simply allow non-residents who meet the requirements to pay a reduced rate, maybe as far down as the resident rate, but maybe just a little bit of reduction. It varies by program. And if you had any phrase that you needed to use to describe exemptions and waivers, it would be varies by program. Because these programs, there are over 50 of them, close to 60 different exemption and waiver programs. And each one of them has its own characteristic and uniqueness. Okay. Another thing that you look at when you talk about exemptions and waivers is that some of them are optional, meaning when you look at the statute, it says the governing board of an institution may. That lovely word may means it's optional, means that your institution gets to decide whether you're going to make those awards or not. Obviously, if your institution decides to make the awards, you want to be consistent and do it for all students who are eligible. Mandatory, on the other hand, if you look at the statute, says shall. The governing board of an institution shall, or a student is entitled to. Those kinds of words say mandatory. And if you have a person who is eligible for that, you are required to make the award. Another little thing that has come up, and we're going to be talking a lot about House Bill 1210, is that exemptions and waivers cannot apply to courses that do not generate formula funding. Does anyone know what formula funding is? Basically, it's tax support for a course. So if you think about an institution who is not getting tax support for a class, how is it supporting the class? How does it pay for it? Tuition and fees. So if you get rid of the tuition and fees, suddenly there's nothing to support that course and it becomes a losing one for the institution. So that's, I think, why they have that provision in there. Excuse me. So when you're looking at exemptions and waivers, one of the things that has to be determined is whether the individual course that a student is taking is subject to formula funding or not. And your business office should be able to advise you of that. It's not something typically noted in a catalog of your courses. So it's something that the business office or so forth would need to advise you about for the individual students. Okay. Why do you worry? Why should you worry about exemptions and waivers? They are huge in terms of numbers of people who are helped and the amount of money that's involved. In 2013, which is our latest set of numbers, 242,000 awards were made. Now put it awards as opposed to people, because you could have someone get more than one award at a time. You could have a Hazelwood benefit student getting an exemption from student services fees. You know, these things can combine. That's why when you look at the FADS report, you'll find you have several fields for exemptions and waivers, so that if this person is getting more than one, you have 3 different places you can put it, and then if he still gets a 4th one, that goes where you typically get the private institution data. These things do stack, much to the delight of the students, I must say. Look at the dollar amount for these programs. In 1 year, $632 million of foregone tuition and fees from your institutions. And when I say foregone, what that means is that you don't charge the student and you don't get reimbursed by the state. It is simply lost revenues at your institution. If you look at that dollar amount, that is larger than Texas Grant, TEOG, TEG, Top 10, all of that combined. So these programs are huge in terms of what they can do for students. And one reason that I really urge financial aid folk to get familiar with these is that it doesn't come out of your financial aid budget. It comes out of the height of your institution, but it doesn't come out of your financial aid budget. And so if you get familiar with these programs and you have students applying, you might be able to couple a tuition and fee reduction with financial aid and really make it possible for that student to attend your institution. So getting familiar with these programs is really helpful from a financial aid standpoint, even though they are a bit of a pain in the rear to work with because there's so many of them. Any questions on what we've covered so far? Okay, basically exemptions and waivers get created because the legislature passes a statute to create them. An institution can't just decide, oh, I'm going to go create an exemption for our employees. There happens to be an optional exemption for employees of community colleges, but there isn't one of those programs for universities. So it's very, very specific. Any of you have campuses that have that exemption for you? Good. Okay. In general, when you're trying to work with one of these programs, you look at the statute. We don't have rules for most of them. In your handouts, at the end of the slides, you will find a table that looks like this. And that table is a listing of the current exemption and waiver programs that are going on in the state of Texas. Notice it's 2 pages long. What we have done in this table is in the left column, we've said whether it's mandatory or optional. Second column, we said E or W, exemption or waiver. Again, if it's a waiver, it only impacts non-residents. If it's an exemption, it could be it could be an exemption for a resident or a non-resident, depending on the circumstances. Then you have the basic population or name of the exemption program. The next one is the citation, the statute that describes it or that authorizes it. In the far right column, you have a notation for those few programs that the coordinating board has rulemaking authority. In that case, you have the statute, but you can also come to our rules and get a little bit more explanation. For all of the rest of them, it's up to your institution to figure out what that statute is saying and who qualifies. Okay? We sometimes we often get questions at the coordinating board about the programs. We're always glad to give you our opinions, but that's what they are. If you don't agree with us, except for the ones that we have rulemaking authority, if you don't agree with us, your decision overrides ours. And we will say that to a student who calls us and says, I think I should be able to get this. What do you think? What we hopefully would say was it's up to your institution, because we don't want to get in the middle of that. All right? Okay. In 2013, a year ago, a new bill was passed, Senate Bill 1210, that added another layer of control or restrictions on all exemptions and waivers. We'll talk about the exceptions in a minute. But it basically added a GPA requirement, and for some programs, a limit on the number of hours that you can take and continue to get the exemption. We'll talk about these particulars in a moment. The provisions of Senate Bill 1210 start with this fall 2014, and there is nobody grandfathered. You could have someone who has been getting the foster care, getting the blind and deaf exemption for the last 5 years. And if their GPA is too low, they could lose it this fall unless you had a hardship provision and allowed them to continue. So this is going to shock a lot of kids who find out for the fall that they're not eligible for the award that they have been getting. They're still eligible for the award except for these 2 new provisions that have been added on top of it. Okay. If a student fails to meet, say, the GPA requirement, and brings up their grades, then the next semester that they're in compliance, they can get back in the program. This isn't a lose it forever kind of thing, but so it could be changing each semester depending on how the student is doing. Okay. We tried to simplify all of this, and this was the table that we came up with. And one of the embarrassing things about it is we keep finding little things that aren't quite right about it. So I kind of get back to what we said before, is you're hearing our opinions, not necessarily a legal opinion on this stuff. And we'll talk about where some of the confusion has been. The GPA requirement in statute in Senate Bill 1210 is very definitely for graduates and undergraduates. No question about it. There's no question that there's nothing in there that would indicate it's only for residents or non-residents, so it looks like it's for both. And there's nothing, in fact, it very specifically talks about undergraduates and graduates. So it seems all-encompassing. But the excess hour one gets very, very complicated very quickly. If you read in the statute, it's pretty clear, except it cross-references 54014, which talks about excess hours and losing formula funding for excess hours. At your institution, if you have a student who's taken a class and dropped it, all that kind of stuff, and they reach this limit, the state turns off the formula funding so that you're not getting tax support anymore, and the statute allows you to raise the tuition rate as high as the non-resident rate to offset what was lost in tax revenue. So it's not required that you do that, but it's an option. Senate Bill 1210 piggybacks on that in its application of the hour limit, and that it uses that definition of excess hours in 54014, which unfortunately also cross-references 610595. So it's kind of a daisy chain as you try to figure out how the pieces fit together. No question, it is exemptions only because of the way it's written. It's also clear that it's undergraduates only because again in the way it's written, residents also. So we have the fact that it's residents actually is the reason it's not waivers. Okay, because who gets waivers? Non-residents. Okay, so that's how those pieces fall together. And then the undergraduates only comes from the fact that 54014 has to do with limits in the hours that you take to get a degree, a baccalaureate degree. The little box with all the questions in it has to do with, for two-year colleges in particular, associate's degrees, certificates, and those kinds of programs. And we have in writing indicated that we thought it only applied to people in the baccalaureate degrees because the statute talks about people with 30 hours beyond the 120 hours of a degree. We have, within the last 2 weeks, gotten additional clarification from our legal folks that they actually believe it applies to someone in any degree plan. So you could have someone in an associate's degree program who maybe the degree program is 60 hours long. They've now taken 30 hours beyond that. So if they were in an exemption program at that point, they would lose eligibility for that exemption. I mean, it doesn't keep them from taking coursework and trying to complete it, but they would no longer have the exemption. Once they complete that exemption, once they complete the associate's degree, if they then go on towards a baccalaureate degree, they're in the 120-hour mode and the 30 hours beyond the 120. So it just kind of keeps doing that kind of stuff. All right, there are other things to talk about with regard to 1210, but in general, do you have a sense of who we're talking about or what this is trying to do? Really, where the hour limit came from were complaints, actually, interestingly, at least the ones I heard, were not from institutions, but from some of the advocacy groups for the blind and deaf and so forth. They felt that that the programs were being abused. They also know that the schools say you have a deaf student and you have a transcriber and you get a contract. The student signs up for these hours. They get a transcriber who's going to sign for them, and then the student drops the hours. And they still have this contract they have to pay even though they don't have a student to use those services. So those are some of the things that generated this interest in adding some limit to it. Also, you just think of people sometimes abusing these programs. All right, if you are not having to pay tuition and fees, there's not much of a restraint about taking courses that you don't really need to take. So, okay, next. The lady or the person who sponsored this program is Senator Zaffirini. And if you have ever met her or heard her speak, she is a strong advocate for foster care students. And so one of the first groups that they said in the bill would not be impacted by these two additional requirements, the GPA and the hour limit. The foster care is number 2. It was listed here. Another one is dual credit students. So if you have high school students who are getting the waiver or exemption from hours, the GPA can't cause them to not be able to do that anymore. Obviously, they're not yet in college, so the hour limit's not an issue, but the GPA could be an issue for them. The exemption for ex-prisoners of war, there's only 1 or 2 such people, thankfully, a year, but that is an exception, doesn't have that requirement. Probably, okay, and then the other thing that we learned after we had first started trying to figure this thing out is this last bullet on this slide. In the first paragraph of Senate Bill 1210, it says a student who does the following through an exemption and program in this subchapter. And somehow originally we had overlooked that little phrase in this subchapter. And it has huge implications because in the subchapter that this is all in is subchapter D of Chapter 54 of the Education Code. And there are some exemptions and waivers that are outside that particular subchapter. So what you have on this list again in the bright orange indicates that they're not subject to Senate Bill 1210 because they're located outside subchapter D. Subchapter D. Okay? This making sense to you? Are you okay with it? If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Okay. Another group of people that is exempted are certain Hazelwood recipients. Now, it's not all Hazelwood recipients. If you are crazy enough to have memorized all these statutes, you would have an understanding that what they have done is said the exemption from Senate Bill 1210 requirements applies to the children and the spouses of deceased veterans, period. They do apply, the requirements do apply to the veterans themselves and to the children and the spouse of disabled veterans. Why they chose those distinctions, no idea, but that's in statute. Yes, ma'am.
Let me wait for the mic. Okay. For clarification, this week there was a Hazelwood conference, and there was back and forth about the SAP policy. So my understanding is we're to look at the GPA component only. Okay.
The bottom line is that the Texas Veterans Commission is administering the Hazelwood Act, and I believe that is their reading that it's SAP, and actually it's in their rule that it is SAP. They went through the negotiated rulemaking process for their whole set of rules for Hazelwood. And so in that process, their decision was that all of SAP applies to Hazelwood. So if you have questions about that, I would ask you to talk to them. The other programs, what I'm saying, I believe is correct. But for Hazelwood in particular, they are the ones who are beating the drum. And you need to listen to them, but think of it as being a Hazelwood decision, not an exemption and waiver decision, okay? All right? Again, the SAP provision is in the rules that were adopted through the negotiated rulemaking process, okay? So anyway, The last group that is exempted are people who are getting waivers, so they are what? Non-residents, thank you, and are getting to pay the resident rate. All right, you would think that would be all waivers, but it isn't. That would be too easy. Can anyone name a waiver that does not go down to the resident rate? Any of you use the border county waiver? Okay, there are waivers for people from bordering states to come in, and the tuition rate is based on reciprocity, what a Texas resident would pay in that state. So it may be down to the resident rate, in which case you would have an exemption from this, but if it's a different dollar amount than the resident rate, this would apply. Anyone heard of the Good Neighbor Scholarship? How much tuition do you pay? None. So you're not paying the resident rate, and by letter of the law, they would not be eligible for the exemption. I'm sorry, the exception to the exemption. Okay? So Good Neighbor Scholarship is not subject to the Senate Bill 1210 does apply to Good Neighbor. Okay? Are we having fun yet?
I have a couple of online questions.
Okay.
By the way, FA Meeting is now working. You can still send it to that email address or to my email address, and I'm getting them all now. So
I just realized I forgot to announce that I'm not taking any questions during this
no,
presentation.
you need to take these two questions.
Can I go
Okay,
for
here's
that?
the first one.
Oh, poo.
Previously, we've been told that the excess hour limitation only applied to bachelor degrees. Now you're saying that the excess hour limitation also applies to associate degrees. Did I understand this correctly?
Yes, you did. We have a new interpretation, and we are in the process of getting that information out to you.
Okay. Second question. Since SAP is for continued enrollment, we're talking about Senate Bill 1210, what do we look at for the initial eligibility determination? If it's only continued eligibility, does the legacy determination change also to this new rule? Because if you'll remember, legacy requires the institution's satisfactory academic progress policy. So I think.
Well, again, the first year in any of these programs is not subject to Senate Bill 1210. It's only the continuation awards. In fact, if you look at the title of the statute, it indicates for continuation awards. So you have a new student coming in, they wouldn't have a GPA. So I think the answer is if it's an initial recipient of the exemption or waiver, Senate Bill 1210 is not relevant.
And then as far as the legacy determination, that would be a TVC question, correct?
Right. Legacy is a part of Hazelwood, and they ought to go to TVC. Yeah.
Okay, and I have another question from our presentations this morning, which I'll ask when you're finished with this.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. If you look at Senate Bill 1210, it goes into some detail as to what hours are to be counted in getting up to the excess hour limit. And this next slide that you have indicates what's in the statute as to not to count hours exclusively through examinations, dual credit hours, and hours for developmental education are not counted in the count towards the excess hours. I ought to point out to you is I don't know if these are the same rules that apply when they are just trying to figure out whether they're losing formula funding and can charge the higher tuition rate. So this may be a different configuration of hours than they're looking at. So you probably want to talk to your registrars and whomever to find out how they calculate the point at which someone could be charged the higher tuition rate due to excess hours, because you may be able to piggyback on their calculations if they are the same, and I just don't know. Okay? You can override the excess hour limit due to good cause. And there are actually indication in indications in Senate Bill 1210 as to what some of the options are for hardship, and you'll want to take a look at that. I believe you have a copy of the Senate Bill 1210 just after the table. It's in your handout. Okay. I think I've gotten ahead of myself. We've gone through this. Okay, as I said before, the 1210 does not apply to waivers that let them pay a resident tuition rate. It does not apply in general to waivers because Senate Bill 1210 as a whole, including the GPA, does not apply to waivers because it only applies to, I am getting so mixed up, and I apologize. Let me try this again. 1210 doesn't apply to waivers that allow you to pay the resident rate. The excess hour requirement does not apply to waivers at all because those are non-residents. Okay? Sorry. And the GPA restriction applies only to the border state, the Good Neighbor, and the other programs that have that unusual tuition rate for the non-residents. And I apologize. As you can see, I managed to confuse myself regularly on this. Any questions? Do I need to say anything more? Would you like me to just quit talking, please? Okay. If you're interested in some additional information about these programs, we do have information sheets or fact sheets for each one of the exemption and waiver programs in the College for All Texans website. If you go to the College for All Texans website, then you can see the first option is students, and then there's military. There are 3 boxes at the top. Click on students, and then go to types of financial aid, and you'll then have the option of exemptions, grants, and that kind of thing, and waiver. If you click on exemptions, you get an alphabetical listing of all of the state's exemption programs, and as you open those up, you get a summary of what the eligibility requirements are, and so forth. The same is true about the section on waivers, okay? One of the biggest problems with exemptions and waivers as you try to go out and talk to students about it is that you can't look at a student and say, oh, you were in foster care, weren't you? I mean, you can't, they have to self-identify in order to be able to get these benefits. So the problem is getting enough information out there for them to know that, to at least ask the question. So what we would recommend, to the extent that you can, and again, since this money comes out of the hide of the institution, you want to make sure you're working within institutional policies if you're going to go out and talk a lot about them. But one of the things that we would recommend is in the high school outreach programs to share basic information about exemptions and waivers so that parents sitting in the audience might know about it and then pick up on it. I had a call from a foster parent who said, my foster daughter finally has figured out what she wants to do. She wants to go to college. She wants to become a nurse, and I'm so happy for her. How do we get her into this program? And she had missed the deadline, her date, by about 3 weeks. And this is free tuition and fees for life. And she was too late. At that point in time, the deadline, you had to be 21 or less in order to get it. She had just turned 21, and that's kind of helped her got her act together. But at that point in time, she could not get into the program. So getting the information out there would be really, really good and really help some of these students. But obviously, it will raise that $600 million a year amount up higher. Let's see. I guess that's it. Are there any other questions about the exemptions and waivers? Again, the main thing you need to know when you're working with them is that they are governed by the statute that creates them. Your institution can't just create a program and decide they're going to go and do this, even if it may be a really good idea. They need to get a statute created that authorizes the program. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, or you're welcome to contact me, and I wish you well. Thank you very much.
Can I ask this question because I don't know the answer to it and I want to hear your answer? And it's not about exemptions and waivers, it's about TEOG and Texas Grant.
Okay.
Okay. If a student, and this is from this morning and we're just now getting it, so if a student is issued a refund check, it's an institution that actually gives their residual refunds in check form for Texas Grant or TEOG, but never cashes the check, are we required to return those funds to the coordinating board? And here's a term I never know if I pronounce it correctly. Or can they escheat? How do you say that? Escheat? Escheat? It's escheat? Escheat to the state.
I have no idea.
Accounting term.
I mean, it's and I'm not talking about, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I also don't know the answer to the question. We'll need to check on that and get back.
Is the refund check coming from the Texas Grant?
No, what they're talking about is they've paid all their tuition and fees, and then they're getting this leftover money to go, and that was
And it went
Texas
to them in the
Grant.
form of a check, and the student never cashes the check. So the institution is wanting to know if that, whatever that word is, to the state, does it go back, does it default back to the state, or
I don't
how
think
does
they
it get
can come
back
back
to
and
the
ask
state?
us to provide the funds. Pardon?
This is a question from the bursar's office.
Yeah.
They don't void it and
They know
What,
it wasn't issued because it's still outstanding in their records? Is that it?
Yeah, I don't know if this person is still listening, but the question from our audience here was, do you not void the check then and then have the money to send back to the coordinating board? And I know you're not here to answer that question, but
Okay,
I don't
we
know how
can
to
look
answer
further
that
into that and get an official answer.
maybe we'll look further into it and include it on the next Q&A. How about that?
Sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Thanks, guys.
I do have another exemption and waiver online question. Sorry.
Not allowed.
If a hardship is approved due to GPA and or hours, is the hardship approved indefinitely, or must the student submit a hardship appeal each semester?
I don't think you can do one sweepingly for all of the future. Now, it may well be if you're talking about someone with a severe handicap or something like that, that you might be able to put it on file and just confirm that it's still there and the conditions still exist. It can be minimized, but I don't think that they can just, it depends on the basis for the hardship. If it's something that would be a temporary condition, then certainly they need to confirm it for each semester. If it's a permanent position and they have that documentation in-house and can find it if they were audited, they're probably okay to go on. How's that?
It's a professional judgment call.
Right, but it's still a matter of maintaining the documentation.
Right.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm back. I'm going to do a very short presentation on some upcoming changes that will be affecting our web applications. The coordinating board is going to be enhancing security for all web applications. And so this is going to affect certain web portals that you currently use. For example, it will affect your awards student history web portal and your fund request web portal. Basically, we're going to be issuing individualized IDs and passwords. The new protocol will require that a staff member at the financial aid office be identified as a liaison to work with us at the coordinating board and issue or approve users. It's a very familiar process that you guys should work with. I think the feds do the same thing where there's an in-house person that approves users and takes away approvals. This is upcoming. This will be starting hopefully around September. We will be sending out emails asking all financial aid directors to either identify themselves as the liaison coordinator for the school or to identify another staff who will act as on their behalf. Once that person is identified, then we'll start the process of getting everybody new IDs and passwords. When this process begins, it will automatically shut down the old ID and passwords. So we'll give you a heads up of and then the next day it's turning off. Any questions?
When you say a heads up, will it come to our basic email boxes?
Yes, so the first people who will be identified would be the financial aid directors. Once they've identified the liaison user, we're going to contact you personally and say, okay, you are going to be the liaison for your school for this web application for TEOG. So first we're going to give you access, and then anyone in your school who wants it has to ask you for permission.
I mean, when you're taking away someone's or changing the password and shutting that down, will that, the day that you make that aware, will it go to the generic boxes that we have?
It probably will go to the generic boxes and then our personal contact boxes. We have contact information from the fund request forms of the directors and then the fund program managers and also the business office. So we're going to kind of let everybody know this is happening, even the people who may not be using the web portals, just to say, hey, someone may call you back and say, I can't get in, and you know why. Again, I was talking briefly about the liaison staff. That person will be responsible for identifying users and their accessibility. Once they're identified, they'll have their own individualized ID and password. If they decide to leave your school, then you would take away their permissions. If the director leaves, then I would be notified, and then I would take the director's position, and then permissions away, or meaning the coordinating board, would take the director's permissions away and then assign it to someone else in the meantime, an interim. We will be sending out notifications upcoming. They are going to be sent through the distribution list, information about it, so you guys will know when that's all happening. It is coming soon, although I don't have any specific dates. We're hoping September. It could be later. If it's early September, I would probably ask them to hold off because that's when you do a lot of your fund request processing. So it would be later September or October. Any questions about this? All right. Well, we have now our audit and compliance team ready to present. Just one moment.
Good evening. My name is David Mahoney. I am a compliance specialist here at the coordinating board. On behalf of our director, Mark Pale, I thank Jane and her staff and y'all for letting us come and be able to present to you a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we came to be. I'm going to give a brief overview of all of those things. I always like to speak after lunch. Everybody is full and satisfied. And if you want to take a nap, you have my permission. I will not be offended at all. In fact, you may prefer that. I know full well that auditors specifically myself, are not the most fascinating people in the world. And our subject is not the most fascinating subject in the world. So feel free. The history of the coordinating or the compliance function came to be in April of 2012 when the coordinating board underwent a sunset review, which occurs, I think, for each state agency in the state of Texas. And one of the recommendations that the sunset review made in that review was that the coordinating board should establish a compliance function to ensure the proper use of funding and the accuracy of data that the coordinating board uses for those funding purposes. Our commissioner felt very strongly about the need for a compliance monitoring function. So he initiated the process early, and in October of 2012, the coordinating board hired 2 compliance specialists at that point and started the development of the compliance monitoring here at the coordinating board. I consider the compliance monitoring still in its infancy stage here at the coordinating board. We are still developing as a unit and a process. So some of the things that you hear today may change in the future as we develop and get better at what we do. I've been a state auditor for 27 years, and I guarantee you I'm a better state auditor today than I was when I first started. It takes a while for any shop to become good at what they do. But next event that occurred after the Sunset Commission was the 83rd legislative session met and adopted Senate Bill 215. And that Senate bill kind of outlined some processes for compliance monitoring for the coordinating board. But one of the main things that Senate Bill 215 did was indicate that those processes and procedures for compliance monitoring were to be enacted or adopted through negotiated rulemaking. And y'all learned a little bit about negotiated rulemaking this morning. Was anyone in this room part of the negotiated rulemaking process for compliance monitoring? Oh, okay. Well, you missed a fascinating meeting, I guarantee you. So in November of last year, 2013, a group of stakeholders from across all different types of institutions came together. I believe there was about 25 different types of different institutions, community colleges being one of them, met here at the coordinating board and established, or out of that meeting came the Texas Administrative Code 1.13, which pretty well mirrors what the Senate Bill 215 said. And the purpose of that TAC that was enacted was that our compliance monitoring process would be used to maximize the effectiveness of the monitoring of funds that are given to institutions of higher education in the state of Texas, and to ensure that the data submitted by institutions and used by the coordinating boards for various purposes, including formula funding, are accurate and complete. That Texas Administrative Code also allowed different methodologies that we in compliance monitoring can use to perform our work. 2 of those being site visits and desk reviews. We do our site visits. It is a performance audit, and the desk reviews are non-audit services. And later on you will hear more about the distinction between what those 2 areas or 2 ways that we can do our work are, and what makes them different. Our preeminent focus is on 2 areas. It's the integrity of the data that is submitted to the coordinating board or formula funding data. And then the other area, of course, is financial aid, making sure that financial aid is being spent in accordance with all rules and regulations. We have stakeholders out there that are concerned about what we do and involved in what we do. The State Auditor's Office, the Sunset Commission, universities and institutions of higher education throughout the state of Texas. Or to put another way, we're auditors. We're here to help you. You've heard that several times, I'm sure, too. Our site visits and our desk reviews both are done in accordance with government auditing standards, and or otherwise known as the Yellow Book. If you're interested in what that Yellow Book says, you can go on to you can Google government auditing standards, and for performance audits, the first 3 chapters of the Yellow Book and chapters 6 and 7 apply. And for non-audit services, the first 3 chapters apply. If you really need a good night's sleep, you're welcome to go and read the Yellow Book. It will put you to sleep like that, I guarantee you. It is a fascinating piece of reading. Next slide. That should show you we currently, we must have missed a slide, but currently we have 4 compliance staff on board here at the agency. As you can see there, we are under the internal audit shop. Our boss is Director Mark Pale, the Director of Internal Audit, and then he reports functionally to the board, who reports also to the commissioner. All 4 of our compliance monitoring staff are in the room today, so I'm going to have them stand up when I call their names, and these will be the smiling faces that you see when you are contacted by us. We have Priscilla Suggs, who is going to be giving the second half of this presentation, Netta Sanjar, and Keith Overton Hadnot. So these are the, along with myself, are the 4 staff that come and do compliance monitoring or audit or review at your institutions. Has anyone out there had a compliance monitoring site visit or desk review? I see one person here from Lone Star College. I know that we have, I think we've done at least one site visit at one of the campuses for Lone Star. If you haven't had one, you will. We are going to be coming to all of the facilities throughout the state of Texas, I guarantee you. With that being said, I'm through, and now Priscilla will come and she will tell you more about the specific processes of a site visit versus a desk review.
I just want to thank David for kind of introducing, and thanks for pointing us out. Now you guys know who we are, and probably gonna have to duck. Now we can't hide, yeah. But like David said, like, we're here to help, and I know that's contrary to what most people may think. Like, when you think of auditors, you just think of extra work. But hopefully, like David said, we're developing this process. We're trying to streamline it, and we're trying to make it as easy for you guys as well as for ourselves. Like, we have a job because of this requirement now, so we want to make it as easy for everyone as possible. So kind of jumping into what David, all of you, have you guys kind of participated in A133 audits before, or so you kind of know like the routine, like, no? So some people, so basically like, as David mentioned earlier, we fulfill our requirement by performing these engagements either through site visits or through desk reviews. And basically the TAC section 1.13, it pretty much requires that we do an annual risk assessment. And so we look at the universe of institutions across Texas, and they're about 146, but this is a process that we're refining annually just because there's so many factors to consider when you're doing a risk assessment. And we're tasked with reviewing formula funding as well as financial aid, and there's several programs. All of the institutions you guys have, maybe the majority of your funding, it might be TEG, it might be Texas Grant, it might be, it varies. So basically, like, we have to kind of evaluate different factors. And so the TAC, it outlines certain areas that we have to consider. So currently our risk assessment, we look at the volume of funds that you guys receive, so grants, loans, and formula funding. We also look at prior audit review coverage, so the recency, like how recent have you had a review from compliance monitoring? And then we look at prior audit findings. So the Department of Education, the SAO, their audits, we look at our old reports, and basically what we're taking into consideration is just the significance or the materiality of the findings, whether or not it lends to control weaknesses or whether or not there's process deficiencies. And that's something that we have to consider when, when we're evaluating your institution against other institutions. And we also look at management concerns, anything that the coordinating board, anything that they're notified, like changes in your institution's management, new information systems, anything that kind of introduces risk. And because basically at the end of the day, like, we're all here to mitigate risk and to ensure that, like, the students get the money that they deserve. So that's basically, we're just tasked to make sure that you guys are being good conservators of funds. So the actual process, pretty easy process. For the most part, we'll begin the engagement. We'll notify your administration. We'll touch base with your program area. I think all of you guys are financial aid, loans, and grant programs are representatives of those programs. So basically, we'll be touching base with you. Depending on whatever program was selected for review, we'll contact that program director and usually the financial aid director, and then we'll start corresponding. And we'll basically try to agree to a date for us to come out. And usually the site visit we block off 1 week for us to come out. And can we go back? Sorry. And also, like, when we begin the site visit, basically we'll begin the site visit the first day of the visit. We'll do preliminary planning before actually physically coming out there. So we'll confirm the date with you guys. We'll gather information, do a little research, make sure that we understand whatever the policies and procedures, the statute that you guys are supposed to adhere to for that program, and then we'll coordinate with you guys, and actually we'll probably do a teleconference, like an interview over the phone, just to gain additional information and understanding from you guys so that we know what we're coming into when we actually physically come on site. And when we do physically come on site, we will conduct an entrance conference, and that's just like kind of to introduce everybody, for us to introduce ourselves to your staff, and for us to basically kind of introduce the audit process. And we'll give you a brief overview of our objective. We'll talk about the audit timeline, what you can expect from us during that week, and then basically the timeline as far as reporting and the end of field work, all the way through the completion of the audit, the engagement. So the next step is actual field work. So while we're on site and we're doing the site visit, during that week we're actually going to be testing controls and reviewing like the program's compliance to statute. And so we'll coordinate with you, and during that time you guys are going to have to make your staff available to kind of help assist us with anything that we need, and basically pulling, supporting documentation, things like that. And so pretty much we'll be on-site testing, and right after that entrance conference we'll get started. And so that whole week will be considered field work. And then sometimes we finish early. It just depends on like the timing and the extent of how well things are available for us. And so as soon as we conclude our testing, then we'll wrap up that week by doing a preliminary issues meeting. And basically there we'll summarize like the results of our findings and whatever we identified during the review. Wait, Polly, you're going too fast. So basically the audit findings, so there are instances, like David said, like this function is relatively new. We have had no issues. We've had issues, and we're actually trying to figure out how to streamline that process, and where it's kind of trial and error. Like as we identify the type of problems or the type of concerns that are arising, we don't really have a process yet to address how to manage that. So that's kind of where this is a work in progress. If there are no observations or no items noted during the review, then we'll jump straight to a final report. There's no need for a draft. But if we do note observations at the completion of fieldwork, basically at that preliminary issues meeting, we'll give you a summary of all of the issues that we observed while we're on site. and that'll give you an opportunity to provide feedback and any additional support to resolve it. And then, because there's no need to carry anything forward if you guys can clear it up. And then also, if we don't finish all of the test work while we're on site, we'll give you an opportunity at the end, or when we do come back to the office, we'll give you a summary of everything that remains outstanding, and then at that time you guys will have an opportunity to resolve anything that you can. And then from there, basically we'll go to whether or not any outstanding items need to be carried forward. And there's two ways to dispose of things. They're either going to be communicated in a management letter or in the actual report. A management letter is specifically addressed to your institution. No one else receives it other than your institution's administration. But the report is public. That is distributed to other oversight entities like David mentioned earlier, the SAO, the Sunset Commission, and the CB administration. So that's one, if something, and basically what determines whether or not an issue gets reported in the management letter versus the report is the significance of it and the materiality. If it's something, that's material, it's going to go in the report. But if it's something like maybe just a process weakness or something that, you could do better, that might be communicated in the management letter. If not, just via informal correspondence between us and you guys. So, next. So the draft report, like I said before, if there are any items that are noted, then we'll actually issue a draft report, and basically that'll summarize all of our observations, and you guys will provide that to you a few days before we schedule an exit conference, and that'll give you time to preview the draft report. And then at the exit conference, and it depends on the significance of the items we note, whether or not we're actually going to come on site or whether or not we whether or not we conduct that exit conference via teleconference. Because if it's something, if you guys know the issues, you know what's going on, and there's not much to discuss, and that's something, we'll coordinate with you on how best to schedule that. And then at that time, you'll take the draft report and you'll have an opportunity to provide management responses. And usually we give you 2 weeks to do that. So basically, any of the items noted or the observations that are documented in that draft report, you guys are going to have 2 weeks to respond. And we're going to use your responses verbatim. So that's something to consider when you do provide them. It's going to be published in a formal report. So you're going to make sure all your grammar, everything is just as you want it. Did you have something to add, Dave? Oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me okay? Sorry, it's after lunch. I'm struggling to. After lunch. It's the worst time to present. And I know it's the most, I just sat through a week of training, so I totally understand what you guys are going through right now. So it can be draining, but hopefully this information is useful. Like if you guys have any questions, feel free to holler or chime in at any time. Again, like we're here, we just want to make sure that it's kind of an open door policy so that you know what to expect and we can kind of help. Like I said, I know everyone has their own, you have your own jobs at the institution, and this is just like one of those hassles that you have to deal with, but it's one of those things. And hopefully, like through the process, like if anything, it just strengthens your institution and your staff, like you get better at what you do. And at the end of the day, like, we're making sure that these funds are used towards what they're supposed to be used, or, towards students that are actually eligible. Let's see, so almost done. And then actually, once we receive your responses, like I said, we'll actually review them. We'll make sure, depending on the report, again, like David mentioned, this function's new, so we're not certain yet. It depends on the type of finding that's documented or the type of observation that's documented, whether or not we're actually going to issue a recommendation on, this is the risk that we've identified, and you're basically going to provide the solution to that. But sometimes we're just going to note instances of errors or exceptions, and that just might be a data error or something. So that's something that you'll respond to it. But as far as our follow-up, it depends on the finding whether or not we're going to have to go back and validate whether or not you implemented your actual you took the corrective action that you indicated in your management response. And so we'll distribute the report once we receive your responses. And if there are no errors, this process just kind of jumps from the summary. Once we have that preliminary issues meeting, we'll jump and document our final report. And then from there, we'll give you an opportunity to preview it. The exit conference will be via teleconference if there's no issues. And then from there, we'll finalize it. It'll go through internal review here, and then we'll actually distribute it to all the oversight entities that David mentioned earlier, our stakeholders, which SAO, they used to actually do these audits in the past, but they kind of abandoned them and threw them on us. So that's, we're here now. But just keep in mind, like, because they're public reports, you want everything to be, on point. That way, basically. And then, so as far as follow-up, periodically the coordinating board, like all of since our function is new, I think there are maybe a handful, like as 2 or 3 reports that actually have observations. So the frequency in which we do follow-ups, usually follow-ups are done quarterly, but it all depends on whenever your target date is for your implementation. So you provide your management response to any of the observations, and then you'll also indicate a target date when you anticipate implementing that. And then we obviously can't hold you to it until after that date. And so sometime after then is when we would follow up with you and verify basically whether or not you took the action that you indicated you would. And this is pretty much the overview of a site visit. Do y'all have any questions or any fears? I don't know what David was saying, like auditors, we tend to have the most personality, right? Or no? Have you guys do you have good relationships usually, or you no? So the last slide basically is just kind of over the desk review process, and that's even more informal than the site visit. Desk review basically. We're going to do, it'll be a smaller sample size. We're not physically going to come out to your institution. We'll correspond with you via email and telephone and pretty much exchange data over secure portal, and that's how that'll work. And like you'll have roughly the same, we'll ask that you allocate a week to dedicate to our staff so that we can, if we need anything else, any additional information to complete our testing, but otherwise, that's what you can expect as far as the differences. Pretty much it. Are you all good? Feel like you're ready for the next audit? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to talk to you. And if y'all have any questions, like, feel free. Mark is a great guy. He's always willing to extend a hand and clarify any misunderstanding or any additional information that you guys might need. And you can also reach out to us too. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Priscilla. We have a couple of exemption waiver questions that have come in while Priscilla was presenting. First one is, it was mentioned that a school cannot create its own exemption waiver without support of a statute. Could a school create a local exemption waiver if the institution uses auxiliary funds to cover the loss of tuition?
My understanding to that, the answer to that would be yes. The state is interested in having the tuition paid for unless there is a state authorized exemption or waiver. So if you are paying for it from auxiliary funds, the state's happy because that money is coming in as tuition. So you're just paying it on behalf of the student.
Okay, and the second question is, on the handout, it says that the adoption exemption does have to follow the SAP rules of Senate Bill 1210 and such. And the foster care is exempt from having to follow Senate Bill 1210. We thought these were the same exemption. Is the coordinating board saying that they are not the same and that the adoption students must follow SAP and the others not? And the other, yeah.
Okay. There are 2 programs dealing with foster care or people who are adopted who are formerly in foster care. The adopted one is Texas Education Code 54367. The foster care is 54366. Now, I do not know why the exemption was given for the foster care 366 and not the other one, but according to Senate Bill 1210, it's only 54 366 that is not subject to the Senate Bill 1210 requirements.
And did you notice she did all that without looking at the paper? I know, it's like, one of these days I think this tape is just going to come out of her mouth, with all this stuff just written on it. Okay. Those are the only questions that I had online that I've received since the presentations this morning. I noticed that our LPO staff are in the room, and as I mentioned earlier, they are no longer officially on the agenda to do a presentation, but they did want to be here just in case there are any questions from our audience here or our online listeners. So do you want to come up and does anyone have any questions about the Beyond Time or the college access loan or anything that Albert or Davin can answer for you?
Hi, I'm Albert Contreras, and I manage the loan origination section for the loan program. Here at the coordinating board. And we know a lot of your institutions may not participate in our loan program, so that's why we didn't want to hold the whole group hostage. But we will be. We'll hang around in case, for those of you who do participate or have questions, we'll be more than glad to entertain any questions you might have. This is Davin Burt. He's one of my staff, and we'll just kind of hang around. And I'll let them dismiss and do what else. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions that you can think of about anything we've talked about today that you'd like to bring up? Oh, good. You have a microphone. And I'm also going to step just to see if we have any online ones.
Okay, my question was about the Texas grant renewal money. I understand that we don't have an allocation for that, so I wanted to be sure I understand how we need to request the funds when we do need to award it.
What we've done is we have estimated how much you will need at all of the two-year institutions for renewal year awards, and we have held that money out to be used for that purpose. So as you need it for your eligible renewal students, you will submit the funds request form for those students as you need it and are dispersing it to them. It's just that simple. There's just no allocation that you have to keep track of. We're keeping track of it.
So we will have an allocation amount?
You will not have an allocation amount on the form. That is correct.
Unlimited funds.
Yeah, it's as needed. Good question, though. Any other questions that have come up that you might want to ask? Okay, two things I would like to remind you before you go. One is that if you would complete your evaluation forms, the online listeners would complete the evaluation form that's available on the website where the agendas and all the other handouts were. There's an evaluation form. If you'll complete it and then submit it as an attachment to FA meeting, which is now working, we would really appreciate that. And for our participants here in the room today, if you would also complete it and just leave it on your table. As I said, we really do look at those, and we made changes just from last week's to this week's based on some of the feedback that we received. The last thing I would like to let you know is we did make handouts for people who attended today, and there are extra ones because some of you probably brought copies or whatever. If you want to pick an extra one up on your way out to take it back to someone in the office, you're more than welcome to do that. We would much rather you take it and use it than throw it away. So, and if there's nothing else, I guess we are finished. And thank you very much for coming today, and for those of you who are listening out in cyberspace.
Travel safely.
Travel safely, yes.